everybody. Very good morning and a warm welcome from Johannesburg. Yes, we are live from the city of gold. I'm with Elvis, I'm with Kendall. We're together. Before we get to Bafana, Elvis, we've got other important business to attend to.
Yes, people are smoking it up here in this country. There have been 15 million people, that is, because 15 million cigarettes are being smoked per day.
Illegal ones.
Illegal cigarettes.
That's only the illegal ones. 15 million illegal cigarettes are smoked every day. That's our theme. We're going to talk to the industry. We're going to talk to other stakeholders and find out what is the issue with illegal cigarettes. What is an illegal cigarette, mind you? That's what I'm going to ask you. And we ask you the poll. Do you have a problem? It's cheaper. It's cheaper than legal cigarettes, obviously.
Kendall, look at the numbers.
151 votes in already, and 69% say yes, they've got a problem with illegal cigarettes, whereas 31% say, you know what, it doesn't matter, legal or illegal, they don't care.
Well, I tell you, it is a problem in the country, but let's take a look at what you are telling us. Mondley says they're using it as a mixture when smoking drugs, and they are illegally imported.
A lot of them are made in South Africa, these cigarettes.
Right
now
here
it's
at
not
home.
even imported anymore. Gutalo Rudintanga tells us whether it's legal or illegal, but I have a problem.
Well, you can let us know what's on your mind on that question, but we're also conducting a poll today on our neighbors.
Question of the day, yes. Of course, we have a crisis in Lesotho. Yeah, it is a crisis. When you have, well, kind of assassination in a very public space of military leaders by their bodyguards. We've got a ministerial team there. Elvis, the outlook doesn't look great. So what do you think? How do we deal with this crisis?
When an army commander is being shot, plus, of course, there's two other personnel that were shot with him, we're asking you, what do you make of all of this, Kendall?
Now, it will be very interesting to see what your comments on this particular thing are. And we've got some ideas from Michael Stoller, who says we need to get many AU troops in there to keep order and stability, because an army commander was shot dead by rival military personnel. Imagine that.
Yep, if it happened in South Africa, we'd be teetering on the brink of civil war, I can tell you that. Now, Elvis, what is Dipansu telling us?
Dipansu says, well, they are in the middle of our country. We need to intervene because whatever happens, it will affect us.
Yeah, if there's military fallout, it will definitely affect us, no doubt about that. It is a story we are right on top of. We'll get you updates out of Lesotho today to let you know what is happening. Well, it's not a neighboring country, it's part of our country in the end. But last night was another letdown for Bafana, wasn't it?
A picture says 1,000 words. You can see behind us some very sad looking, and you know, Bafana fans extremely unhappy with what's happened last night. 4-2 on aggregate, we lose to Cape Verde. 2-1 again on the night. We want to find out from you what's next for Bafana.
Yep, we don't even know where Cape Verde is on the map, I tell you that. And they took us right off the map.
Yep. Lagaza says supporting Bafana is like adding 7 plus 3, 8 plus 2, 9 plus 1, 5 plus 5, and hoping you will finally get a different answer. Never, never.
Bernard tells us, give Baxter time to get rid of some ineffective, non-performing players. He must fuse these players with old ones. But Kendall, we only have the talent that we have.
Absolutely, you only have what we have, and it's been long coming, development. But you know what? Some people are even talking about the bench, what it looked like when we were already losing. So there's lots of talking points there.
We made a lot of money 2010 World Cup, and we were going to spend it on building junior leagues in South Africa. That never happened. So the talent's not coming through, and we shouldn't be surprised. But that's where I will leave that before I get into a little bit of hot water. Elvis, so we'll take a look at the headlines.
Let's get down to business. President Jacob Zuma is to convene a high-level meeting with the Police Minister Vakile Mbalula and top police and intelligence officials to discuss the spate of political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment last night in the case brought by the EFF as well as other parties to have the President Jacob Zuma impeached. And the regional body SADC is to send a ministerial team to Lesotho to get first-hand information on the apparent assassination of the army commander Wantle Motsomotso. Now those are your headlines, but before we get there, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Gentlemen, there's lots to talk about. Lots happened last night and this morning as well. But the big story for a lot of South Africans still is about our national football team and the shenanigans
You know, I saw a funny joke on social media. They said there was very little penetration, so they need new strikers.
Oh.
And they said because they need strikers, maybe we should talk to some of our trade unions, because
yes,
the members are very good at striking.
Yeah, thanks for keeping it tidy. I was a little worried when you started talking about penetration and all that. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. After promising much, Stuart Baxter and his Chargers failed to deliver on their promise to bag 6 points from their World Cup qualifiers against Cape Verde, slumping to a 4-2 loss on aggregate.
We were chasing with a lot of attacking players on the field and not really a lot of organisation.
Kevin Anderson triumphs over big-hitting American Sam Querrey in 4 thrilling sets to become the first South African to make a Grand Slam semi-final since 2003.
That's it. Kevin Anderson is going to the U.S. Open semi-finals.
6-7, 6-3, 7-6.
Getting through, it just feels, absolutely fantastic.
Brazil's Olympic chief Carlos Nussmann gets arrested as Brazilian and French authorities uncover an international vote-buying scheme with awarding the 2016 Olympic hosting rights to Rio de Janeiro. All this and more later on in the Sports Bulletin. I, of course, will give Evan another chance to stay out of hot water as we chat a little later, about 9:45 or so, about what happened with Bafana and where to next. All this and more a little later. For now, it's back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma is to convene a high-level meeting with Police Minister Fikile Mbalula and top police and intelligence officials to discuss the spate of political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. Now this after the death of the former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sendiso Magaqa on Monday. Now he succumbed to wounds that he sustained when he was shot in an ambush in July this year.
Sendiso Magaqa is now the 4th leader to have died in Mzimkhulu alone. After almost 2 months in hospital, he lost his fight. His family says they were hopeful as he was recovering well and have been left stunned by his sudden death.
Friday and Saturday, the situation just changed completely. He had a stomach ache, then after that, I think I got money when the doctor called us and told us that, okay, his heart is failed.
Neighbors and ANC members expressed deep shock. Scores gathered at his home to pay their respects. But outside, ANC members brandishing placards saying enough is enough, their anger directed at some leaders. The mood so tense that some party leaders were turned away. Party leaders say the situation in the province is now intolerable.
I can't lie, this situation is unbearable to the movement. It's totally unbearable.
President Jacob Zuma has sent condolences to the family.
We condemn this. Condemn it with all the contempt it deserves. There is absolutely no reason why there should be political killings. Particularly if you take the killings in KwaZulu-Natal, they are clear that they are political and that in fact the people who are doing it, they could even belong to the same organization. It's terrible.
Magaqa was serving as a PR councillor in the Mzimkhulu municipality. He rose to prominence when he became ANC Youth League Secretary General. At the time, Julius Malema was the Youth League President. Magaqa will be laid to rest next week. I am Mhlongo, SABC News, Mzimkhulu.
That story on the back of the poll that we ran yesterday when we asked what is supposed to happen with these political killings, of course in KZN, where we asked, do we need political intervention? Do we need more arrests or do we need more convictions? And there, of course, you have the President speaking to the Minister of Police on the issue. Of course, we'll show you a little bit later what those numbers were on that poll. It's a little bit late to get that on for you now. Meanwhile, the EFF leader Julius Malema says that he will attend the funeral of the former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sendiso Magaqa on condition that a thorough security assessment is done beforehand. He says this must be done in order to ensure that his life is not taken by what he calls bloodthirsty murderers. The EFF leader wrote a lengthy letter explaining how the news of his friend left him broken and in tears. In the letter, Malema said he had to turn back from a meeting that he was driving to when he received a phone call telling him of the devastating news. Malema said he wanted to attend the funeral to pay his respects and to find peace after the trauma he had suffered following the news of Magaka's death. Now, the Constitutional Court has reserved judgment on whether Parliament should institute impeachment proceedings against the President Jacob Zuma. Chief Justice Mogoeng says the court needs clarity on why it should intervene in Parliament's apparent inability to hold Zuma to account. The DA, the EFF, COPE and the EUDM want the court to order the National Assembly Speaker Baleka Mbete to impeach the President after he lied to Parliament over the Nkandla upgrading saga.
This could be termed part 2 of the Nkandla Constitutional Court case. After the ruling in March, Parliament instituted an impeachment as per the DA's application, which failed. Now the opposition parties which participated in that debate say it was unlawful.
Any impeachment process that does not accord the President and the people the right to a hearing is unconstitutional.
The DA agrees and goes a step further, arguing the court should instruct Parliament to enact legislation that impeachment go through an inquiry first before being debated. The main applicant, the EFF, says that the inquiry should have powers to cross-examine witnesses.
Multi-party committee, a mandate is to determine whether the President is guilty of serious misconduct or serious violation, conducted in public, consider relevant documents, and meaningful questioning of witnesses. And it doesn't have to be cross-examination, but witnesses can be questioned. And the President must be allowed an opportunity to come.
The question then is, would an instruction from this court not violate the separation of powers doctrine?
I just have a discomfort. That's why I just want to make sure that I understand what you are saying and what the basis for that are.
Mogoeng also disputed assertion by the Speaker of Parliament's Council about what her limitations are.
It would be inconsistent with an office of an impartial speaker for her to initiate proceedings for the removal of a president under Section 89(1).
No. Why?
Sorry, to initiate it of her own accord.
Why?
Because a motion of no confidence is by its nature partisan.
Now, for the latest on the Constitutional Court bid and the failed motion to dissolve Parliament and have early elections, we are now joined by a political analyst from UNISA, Professor Dirk Coetzee. A very good morning to you, Professor, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
And first and foremostly, Prof, what do you make of the economic freedom fighters and the other opposition parties' arguments yesterday, the Constitutional Court bid, and their bid to have the President Jacob Zuma face impeachment proceedings?
Well, my first impression is that I think both the opposition parties really want to maintain the momentum after the failed motion of no confidence in order to not create the impression that they've run out of options. I think what we are seeing now is that they feel that through Parliament there's no way in which either a motion of no confidence or an impeachment motion can be adopted. And therefore they are looking for alternative methods. They were partly successful with the previous court application to force the speaker or give the speaker the right to decide about a secret ballot, and I think that encouraged them to take this next step. But I think there's a serious difference between the different cases, and that is that in the case of the removal of the president, it essentially is a decision by Parliament itself, and it must come therefore from the floor. And we have in the Constitution quite an explicit explanation of what is required from a motion of no confidence, as opposed to what is required from an impeachment motion. But it means ultimately that there must be a majority support within Parliament. I think there is a case to say that the procedure to follow with respect to impeachment is not as clear as it should be, as it was, for example, recently we saw it in Brazil as well as in South Korea, that an impeachment process have been successful. And I'm not quite sure exactly what it entails in the South African context, how impeachment should actually be implemented.
Now, Professor, why could these parties not use mechanisms available to them constitutionally to make the president more accountable, especially on the matter on Nkandla?
Well, I think to a large extent that has been done. You know, there was the ad hoc committee of Parliament after the Public Protector's report. Most of the parties, opposition parties especially, were very unhappy about it, but it was part of the parliamentary procedure. There were numerous question times during which President Zuma had to respond to the questions and the follow-up questions even. There were the 8 motions of no confidence also, and that was part of the exchange between some of the advocates and the Chief Justice when he was putting this to them and say, well, all of these measures have been used already. What is the complaint about saying that the President cannot be put to the point where he must account to Parliament? So I think that gave me at least an indication that the Chief Justice at yesterday's hearing were not very sympathetic for this argument. And I think one of the main reasons, over and above the other mechanisms that exist within Parliament, is the fact that there are 2 provisions within the Constitution how to deal directly with the President, namely a motion of no confidence and impeachment. And if that is not possible to deal with President Zuma adequately, then it means there is no formal ground for his removal by Parliament.
Now, did the Speaker, that's the big question, did the Speaker act according to the Constitution? For a large part of the focus was on the National Assembly Speaker, Baleka Mbete, that she has continually deflected responsibility to hold the executive accountable.
Well, again, as I said, there were, if you can list all the events that did happen, over and above the 8 motions of no confidence, the 2 impeachment motions, the numerous question times, the parliamentary committee that was established, especially on the for Nkandla, I think then it is very difficult to argue that she did not do her constitutional job and met the obligations of the Constitution. Ultimately, it is not for her to decide how to deal with President Zuma. She is the officiating chairperson, president of the meeting and the sessions of the National Assembly. But it is in the hands of the members of Parliament because ultimately, if you look at the formulation of the Constitution, it says that the decision must be taken by a majority, whether it's an ordinary majority or 2/3 majority. So it means it is in the hands of the members of the National Assembly, and I think more specifically in the hands of the opposition parties. I think the frustration that they experience is the reality of what Parliament is about. Parliament is a reflection of the outcome of an election, which means that there are majorities and there are minorities. We've seen it last time with the motion of no confidence, where they insisted that there must be a secret ballot. But even there, ultimately the majority prevailed. And I think that is for the opposition the point where they feel that there's something wrong with the system itself, that their minority position in Parliament is the main obstacle why they cannot reach President Zuma. But that is the reality of any democratic system. You know, whether you go to the impeachment of Bill Clinton that failed, whether you look at the impeachment in Madagascar recently that failed, whether you look at the impeachment in Brazil or South Korea that was successful, ultimately it is a decision by Parliament, yes, the members of Parliament. It's therefore to some extent a political decision. It's not something which is just an objective judicial decision, yes, that will determine the outcome.
Just briefly, Professor, and lastly, talking about failed motions of confidence in the President in Parliament yesterday, the DA, does this talk to the question of the future of coalition politics in South Africa? Because some of the small opposition parties were not very happy with the Democratic Alliance.
Yes, I think there is a slight crisis at this stage in opposition circles, especially with respect to the coalition. Which started with Nelson Mandela Bay between the DA and the UDM there, but that has now spilled over, and the EFF is unhappy about the situation there, and it spilled over into Johannesburg and Tshwane with their council session meetings there. And what we are now seeing with yesterday's motion in Parliament is that one after the other, the opposition parties stood up and said, well, we were not consulted by the DA about this motion, and therefore we are not going to support it.
Yes.
I think it is symptomatic of a situation where the opposition parties, particularly the EFF, wants to assert themselves again, that they want to avoid a situation where they are seen to use now the much used concept being captured almost by the DA, and that the DA assumed that they will always be there to support them, and the same with the smaller parties, including the UDM, for example. So from that point of view, it's not the end of the coalition arrangements or the cooperation between the DA and the EFF, because they don't have any other options really at this stage. If that doesn't work, it means they give power back to the ANC.
Professor?
So I think they will have to sort out their relationship, but it is at this stage, it's a bit of a test of how strong the cohesion within the alliance of the opposition party is.
Professor, I thank you so much for your time and joining us and giving us your analysis. That was political analyst Professor Dirk Coetzee coming out to us from UNISA at our Pretoria studios. Now, the regional body SADC is to send a ministerial team to Lesotho to get first-hand information on the apparent assassination of the army commander Kwantle Motsomotso, as well as the killing of 2 senior army officers by Motsomotso's bodyguard. The shooting happened at an army barracks yesterday. Last night, Lesotho's recently elected Prime Minister Tom Tabani assured Basotho, as well as the neighboring countries, that he is still in charge. Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma has called for calm following the assassination of Lesotho's Defence Force commander.
Reports said the commander was injured, but unconfirmed reports say he too was killed. Both Hashatsi and Sichile were implicated in the killing of a former army commander, Maparankwe Mahau, in June 2015, but neither confirmed or denied their involvement.
For now, investigations are still going on, and the leadership of the Lesotho Defence Force will be able to brief us at a later stage, as they are still pursuing those who might have been involved also in that conspiracy.
Zuma has called for calm in Lesotho as tensions mount in the Mountain Kingdom. The president has commented on the current situation in Lesotho.
From the point of view, we thought that the Lesotho problem has ended. And this is what we were promised by the new Prime Minister, who said, now there's going to be peace in Lesotho.
This week, the Deputy Prime Minister fled the country and the former Defense Minister was arrested. He says upon his return from China, he will immediately meet Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa to update him on the latest developments, as he is the SADC pointsman in Lesotho. President Zuma says he is surprised that this is happening, as they were assured at the SADC meeting that all was normal.
Appeals to the leadership in Lesotho to take things easy, to solve their problems peacefully, without getting into a situation where we could have another kind of conflict in Lesotho. We are actually praying and hoping that they are going to contain themselves and deal with matters properly, as the lead
and unemployment.
People depend on them.
Appointed a committee which will look at the implementation of the Pumapi Commission recommendations, chief amongst those the constitutional and security reforms. Sophie Mukwena, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, that's the reason why we're asking you this question today. How do we deal with the crisis in Lesotho? It is a worrying situation that we would like to get your responses to. Let's take a look at what you are telling us on the Twitter handle. This one from Malibongwe says, take Lesotho and make it one of our provinces, once and for all. Integration, says Malibongwe, that's all that can happen. Gustav says, we can't even deal with challenges within South Africa. How do we expect to deal with other external problems? Well, that's some of your comments coming through. Well, we have another one. We have nothing to do with Lesotho's crisis, says Lahaza. Let's focus on corruption, money laundering, racketeering in South Africa. Well, that's Lahaza's take on it. Well, if we don't sort out our neighbors, we might also have a similar problem. So let's deal with it there as well. SADC is already sending a team there to take a look at the issue. But today our focus is on you and me and everybody else in South Africa that is smoking it up. Let's go over to Yeben. 15 million of us.
Yeah, it's a concern. No doubt it's a concern. And we'll find out who's behind it. There's lots of allegations going around illegal cigarettes. Of course, it's feeding into criminal networks, and it's making a lot of, costing the tax base a lot of money, because for the last 25 years of us, it's estimated that 25 billion rand in tax money has been lost because of this problem, illegal cigarettes. So we asked the question, of course, that's our focus today. Do you have a problem with illegal cigarettes?
Well, we wanted to add the question whether or not people are smoking illegal cigarettes, but that is the question, actually.
That's the question today. Now, after the break, I'll be speaking to Francois van der Merwe. He's the chairperson of the Tobacco Institute. He's in Cape Town. Francois is ready to talk to us. We'll go to him after the break, but let's just do a little bit of housekeeping because there's so much going on today. This is what you can see on social media, of course. If you didn't know this one, well, it's the building collapse in Orange Grove. Yeah, Orange Grove, yeah, in Johannesburg. Now, we are being told right now that 16 people have been injured thus far. No fatalities are reported. It's a developing story, and we'll tell you, we'll share that information as it becomes available today. Building collapse in Orange Grove. Go and check it out. Then, opposition. Opposing political parties rather did not get their way yesterday after the Constitutional Court reserved judgment on whether Parliament should institute impeachment proceedings against President Jacob Zuma. The hashtag is ZumaConcourt, and of course we carried all of that live. Then, Bafana fans, well, they were excited for the match against Cape Verde, but were then again left disappointed, and, well, all of them considering divorce when they lost to Cape Verde for a second time in just a couple of days. Hashtag is Bafana, and the people are not happy. Moving to Myanmar, Burma, mass protests have erupted and turned violent following the slaughter of, well, the minority group of Rohingya Muslims in that country. Now, around 400 people are confirmed dead, and about 90,000 have fled into neighboring Bangladesh to escape likely persecution there. The sentiments on Twitter from Burma and surrounds is that the media is focused on many other less important stories, and that they are not even receiving help from the global Muslim community or the United Nations. Please be warned that these images are shocking, and protect your children. Some of them, well, we can't show them on air today. The hashtag is Burma Massacre, but when you look at those pictures, please, please, please don't expose your children to them because they're just too gory. Now, a state of emergency has been announced in the southern parts of the U.S., Florida to be exact. A hurricane called Irma is on its way, and it's said to will have catastrophic consequences. Yes, they call it the biggest storm in history. Will uproot trees, flatten houses, and even uplift trains off their tracks. The Irma hurricane is the hashtag, and Florida. Yes, let's hope Irma has a little bit of mercy this time around. Anyhow, our picture of the day. Now, this one was tweeted by the city of Joburg, and it kind of encapsulated all of our feelings last night, no doubt. Yes, they should have switched off, Joburg says, you should have switched off your TV at this point of the game. We forgive you. Next time, you know what to do. Save electricity and don't watch Bafana. Ish. No chill, ne? Our tweet of the day, this one comes from Sure Kamunga, who says the following. A good day for Africa's two largest economies. Nigeria is out of a recession now, and the second quarter growth of South Africa, and South Africa is also out of a recession. They've recorded second quarter GDP of 2.5%. So that's a little bit of positive news, isn't it? Really good news. Yes, we're making a little comeback here. It's not all doom and gloom as we always like to make it out here in South Africa. There's always a silver lining. Now, the courts are full. We'll start in Limpopo, where the bail application of a self-proclaimed prophet accused of rape is expected to continue in the Lenyenye Magistrates Court. That's just outside of Tsanin. The suspect, his name is Confidence Monyela. Now, He's accused of raping 4 minors at his church at Burgersdorp village under the pretext of praying for them over the past couple of years. It's a very familiar story here in South Africa. Actually, sounds more like a confidence trickster, but the courts will decide what happens anyhow. Further east in Nelspruit, a 44-year-old former school principal is expected to appear in the Middelburg Magistrates Court. Now, he's facing charges of assault with intent to do grievous bodily harm. Now, his appearance stems from an incident which is alleged to have taken place at a school in Mkluzi, near Middelburg. It's a developing one. We'll keep you updated on any new information that comes out of that and the other case. Of course, violence all around us is a problem tomorrow. Well, tomorrow we'll deal on gang violence, especially in the Western Cape, but it's also spreading to other parts. In the Eastern Cape, it's just as bad. We'll get a proper look into gang violence around the country. We'll speak to activists and community members and find out how they're coming to terms with it. Remember, the murder rate is up by 40% in the Western Cape. No doubt, 40%. That's not for today, though. That's for tomorrow. Today, we'll talk about smoking illegal cigarettes. 15 million illegal cigarettes in South Africa every day. I'll speak to Francois van der Merwe after a short break.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
The Pan-African Parliament as a legislative body could go a long way in continuing to promote women's rights in all African member states.
Moon will be elected president. A decisive win by him will provide much-needed stability in South Korea.
The Deputy President and the SADC Oversight Committee have been mandated to convene a multi-stakeholder national dialogue before elections.
5 teams are trapped in the relegation mud. These include Bloemfontein Celtic, 12th on the log, followed by Chipa United, Free State Stars and Baroka, who are second from the bottom, as well as Highlands Park, who have won only 4 matches.
We're on point with breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune into Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
Welcome back. Let's have a look now at our theme for today. More than 15 million illegal cigarettes are smoked every single day in South Africa. Now, in the process, the country has, well, he's listed amongst the top 5 illicit markets across the world. Last month, British American Tobacco South Africa launched an awareness campaign around the illicit trade of tobacco and cigarettes in this country. It's estimated that illegal tobacco products today account for approximately 24% of the South African market, with an estimated 5.5 billion illicit cigarettes sold in South Africa last year alone. It's also estimated that 80% of the total domestic trade in illicit tobacco is manufactured here in South Africa. Illicit trade networks in this country are said to be well established and linked to crime syndicates that are also involved in a host of other illegal activities such as hijacking and people smuggling. Now, the illicit cigarette trade also defrauds the South African government of much needed tax revenue, with an estimated of 5 billion rand in unpaid taxes on these illegal cigarettes recorded last year. Over the past years, 5 years that is, conservative estimates suggest that the fiscus lost more than 25, closer to 30 billion rand. Now, to talk about the illicit cigarette trade, we are joined from Cape Town by the chairman of the Tobacco Institute of Southern Africa, Francois van der Merwe. Very good morning to you, Francois. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Evan. Thank you for having me on your show.
Francois, I've spoken to people on social media, and the first question people want me to ask you is, what is an illegal cigarette? What is the illicit cigarette trade? And what form does it take in South Africa?
Evan, thank you. Very important matter, very important question. I'll also like to tell you where the illicit cigarettes do not come from, but to go directly to your question, there's a couple of things that makes a cigarette illegal. Firstly, if it does not comply with government packaging regulations. So on a pack, there needs to be various things. There needs to be health warnings, which is prescribed by government. There needs to be a tar nicotine, which is 12 milligram, 1.2. If it's beyond that, it's illegal. There needs to be a reduced ignition propensity marking on, which depicts a certain paper that needs to be used. There needs to be a quit smoking line telephone number on it. And there also needs to be a diamond stamp on it, which is a customs and excise legislative requirement. So any one or more of those that do not appear on the packs immediately makes it illegal. But in South Africa, we find that most even illegal products do comply with the packaging regulations. The biggest problem we have in South Africa is the fact that duties are evaded. Now, you might find it interesting that 16 Rand 30 on a packet of 20 is the minimum collectible tax that needs to go to government. That's 14 Rand 30 excise and 2 Rand VAT just on the excise. That's 16 Rand 30. So anything that sells below 16 Rand 30 must be deemed probably illegal.
Yeah, completely illegal. We see a lot of those cheap cigarettes doing the rounds now, but I saw something that you appeared before Parliament. Can you hear me?
Yes, Evan.
Okay, you admitted before Parliament's Trade and Industry Portfolio Committee that members of the tobacco industry are also guilty or involved of fueling illicit cigarette trade. Can you expand on that for us a little bit?
Yes, Evan, certainly. It's important to note where illicit cigarettes do not come from. And that is the legal industry that I represent. Members of the Institute comprises the whole value chain, farmers, processors, merchants, manufacturers, importers and exporters of cigarettes and other tobacco products. This is the industry that is under threat because of illegal industry, and this is the industry that does not contribute to illegal cigarettes. In fact, this is the industry that the government needs to so that this industry can grow, because this industry that I represent adds 23 billion to the GDP, pays 22 billion in taxes, of which more than 17 billion is excise and VAT, employs 8,000 to 10,000 workers on farms, with 35,000 to 40,000 dependents in rural areas, 600 million rand paid to farmers in rural areas where other jobs are hard to find, and with its multiplier effects sustains an annual production of 54 billion. To this country. And this is what is under threat, even due to the illicit cigarettes. There is no contribution to illicit from this industry that I represent. But as you rightly say, there's a parallel industry which we call the illegal industry. And there needs to be a clear distinction between the industry that I represent, the full value chain that needs to be protected, and the other parallel industry which needs to be eradicated if we want to save this country. Because as you said, the statistics is shocking. Between 2010 and 2016, only 27 billion lost only to government. Around 5 to 6 billion smoked a year illegal cigarettes at 750 to 800,000 packs of 20 per day. It defrauds the government of 4 billion rand average annually, now probably 5 to 6 billion rand. And this money goes into criminal syndicates. It has been proven that it funds other criminal activities as well, like human trafficking, weapon smuggling. It's been regarded and mentioned by Interpol as one of the top priorities in the world as far as criminal activities are concerned.
Francois, how did we become one of the top 5 illicit markets in the world for illegal cigarettes?
Yeah, but I lost you there, but I think, yes, certainly at one stage we were at top 5, but most definitely top 10. And previously, our biggest problem was smuggling from Zimbabwe, where the products were manufactured there and smuggled into South Africa through various countries and our neighboring countries and so on. But SARS did a good job in clamping down with a border modernization program, but the problem has just shifted domestically. So 80% of all illicit products today are manufactured locally. And we believe it is not difficult to resolve this. It is not difficult, and the mandate lies with an integrated approach by government, all law enforcement agencies, but the sole and the primary mandate lies with the South African Revenue Service, and there's low-hanging fruit to be picked here. 4, 5, 6 billion rand a year that can be collected fairly easily by just doing certain things from the Revenue Service perspective.
Francois, in conclusion, I'm more worried about the public and the health and safety of the public. Quickly tell me, how do people differentiate between illegal and legal, and what are the safety hazards?
Well, Eben, most definitely, it's not only fiscal losses to the government and to the legal industry, but there's social impacts. And the biggest social impact is the government's health agenda that's been compromised. The government has an agenda which we support for people to reduce the consumption of tobacco products. But illegal products, minimum collectible tax of 1630, is sold and available. You walk down any street into any shop, you can buy cigarettes for 10 rand and below, 8 rand, 6 rand, 7 rand a pack. That certainly social impacts because it stimulates consumption, kids can buy it, poor people can buy it, and if people can defraud the government on taxes, the quality and compliance standard within those products are also questionable. So for consumers, it's not about buying a bargain. If you buy a packet of cigarettes for 7 rand, you must question the quality of that and the impact that that could have on your health. Tobacco is harmful already, but illegal products could be even more harmful because we've heard horror stories of what goes into those products. So the biggest indicator in South Africa is pricing. If you pay less than 16 rand 30, the red flags must go up and you must question the validity and the legality of that product and also think about the worst impact on your health. So integrated approach, legal industry, government, consumers, everybody working together for the better of this country, the health agenda, and also the social impacts that it has.
Francois, I thank you for joining us. We've run out of time. Interesting the information being shared with us with regards to illegal cigarettes and legal cigarettes. 16 rand 30. That's the number. Think about it. That was Chairman of the Tobacco Institute of Southern Africa, Francois van der Merwe, coming to you live from Cape Town. We're asking you this question. Do you have a problem with illegal cigarettes? You should have. 70% of you do. I wonder what the 30% who say no. What's the thinking behind that? Phoenix tweets us, not unless they're going to attack me, rob me, or kill me. What if it gives you cancer, emphysema, and a whole host of others? Lubuyo Noshe tells us tobacco is just bad no matter what. Slow poison, says Lubuye. Lechasa tweets us, I really don't like cigarettes. I think it should be abolished. Lechasa, it's dangerous, they tell me, if we just abolish things. Things shouldn't be banned. If things are banned, it makes it more cool for young people, apparently. Now, let's just go onto our Facebook page and see what you can see there today. Economists have warned that despite being out of a technical recession, South Africa's current growth levels will not have a significant impact on job creation, we're told. Then President Jacob Zuma has condemned the senseless and regrettable killing of top military Lesotho leader Julius Malema and 2 senior officers and called for calm and restraint in our neighboring country. Then Brazil's top prosecutor charged former President Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva and Dilma Rousseff, along with fellow Workers' Party members, with forming a criminal organization. All of that and more on our Facebook page. Now, let's just take a quick look around the world. These are on the front pages of some of the papers elsewhere in the world. The Telegraph in Australia reports that Malcolm Turnbull has discussed the North Korean crisis with US President Donald Trump. Amid speculation, the rogue nation is preparing to fire an intercontinental ballistic missile. Moving to New York, the Times there says President Trump revoked a program that shields young, unauthorized immigrants from deportation, giving Congress 6 months to draft a legal path to amnesty. Finally, in China, the South China Morning Post reports Chinese President Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi agreed yesterday their countries need to make more efforts to improve mutual trust, and that peace in their border areas was paramount for a positive future relationship. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk more about illegal cigarettes, the health hazards, and what you should be looking out for. Don't miss it.
Why is there a dispute over who is the rightful heir to the throne?
What I can say is that Masindi is a woman. She's a girl. She's a girl child. Because I think that if she was a male, there's no way that anybody was going to dispute the fact that she is the rightful heir.
Do you recognize her as your rightful heir?
Yeah, no, I would definitely say that she is my daughter. She grew up there.
What is the intention?
I want my throne.
Join me in Port Zedu live every Monday to Thursday at 17:30.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Well, the question is, are you lighting it up here in South Africa? If you do, in 2013, South Africa signed a new international treaty that aims to stop the smuggling of tobacco and reduce the smuggling of tobacco products worldwide. That's according to the National Council Against Smoking. 11 other countries also signed, including China, France, Panama, Turkey, as well as Uruguay. And stronger border controls and heavier penalties for smuggling were also recommended. Now, illicit cigarettes are not just harmful to the economy, as you just heard from a previous interview, but often also to smokers who consume them with low-quality, dangerous substances. And the National Council Against Smoking has questioned who is benefiting from the illicit trade of cigarettes. The Executive Director of the National Council Against Smoking, Savira Kaladin, she's here in studio with us to talk to us about this. Savira, very good morning to you and welcome.
Morning, thank you.
First and foremostly, it's a huge number of South Africans smoking illicit cigarettes. We got the number of 15 million people. What do you make of this number?
Okay, so the first thing we have to question are the figures and the credibility of getting those figures from the Tobacco Institute of South Africa, which obviously has a vested interest in knowing how much of legal and illegal cigarettes are being sold in the country. So I just very quickly want to tell you some figures we've previously got from TISA. Between 2006 and 2010, they said the illicit market was 20% of the number of cigarettes smoked in the country. So at the same time, in 2008, they said to Treasury that the figure was 7.9%, right? And at the same time, in the business report in December of 2010, they reported on the year 2008, they said the figure was 11%. I can tell you up to 2012 how they gave us
So these are discrepancies in the numbers,
in
is
the
that what you're
figures that they are giving us. So I would firstly caution anybody from accepting any figure given by the tobacco industry in South Africa. I think we need an independent source of information. I know that later today you're going to be speaking in an hour or so, or less than that, to Professor Corne van Walbeek from UCT.
Yes.
And they're an independent source of data.
Have they done research?
Yes, they've been working in tobacco research for about 20 years, and obviously you.
And we might get some numbers there.
So I think we should not listen to any of the numbers. The credibility is, you know. And just one thing, they said that you know they had huge numbers of what we're losing from the illicit trade. In 2010, they said we were losing $1 billion, and Treasury had said that we were losing half that in taxation.
Well, currently
So
the number
let's
stands at about
completely
6 billion per
disregard.
year. So,
Yeah. So, you know,
there's a lot
just
of
saying,
discrepancies.
So,
So from your
discrepancy
perspective,
to the extent of 50 to 75% less than the figures that they might be
but from
quoting.
your perspective, Savera, who do you think is benefiting from the illicit trade of cigarettes and tobacco?
Well, that is an interesting question again, because we have in the public domain many investigations that have been done by journalists, including the Daily Maverick, Amabungane, the Business Report themselves, all of which have been raising a lot of questions about the practice of the tobacco industry in South Africa. And one of the things they pointed out to us is that SARS in 2013, it could be 2012, had said that the NPA should charge 15 tobacco manufacturers for tax evasion and involvement in illicit trade to the value of 12 billion rands in South Africa. So the tobacco industry has not does not have clean hands in here. I cannot tell you who or what, which is why we've put out a press release saying we want to know. We think more research needs to be done. It needs to be independent research so that we can find out who is responsible for what, and we can find out who owes SARS what kind of money, and have they been paying their fines.
Now, the Tobacco Institute South Africa earlier indicated that it would be very easy to sort of make sure that there's no illicit tobacco trade in South Africa because the law enforcement agencies are there to do their job. It says it's very easy. What do you make of that? Do you think that it's possible? It's
very possible to do it. So step one, I could agree with half of that, half of what they're saying. But they are also on the anti-illicit tobacco trade task team. And again, if we refer to something in the public domain, the book by Johan van Lochenberg, Rogue, which raised questions, which officially SARS had questions as well at that time about the role of the tobacco industry in that anti-tobacco illicit trade task team. So there are many, many questions around the illicit trade. Now, one of the reasons we're having this conversation today is because recently they had a billboard that was put out by the tobacco industry saying that, that when you buy an illicit cigarette, that you are, stopping people from getting homes and medical care, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we all know that any kind of advertising, marketing, sponsorship is banned of tobacco products in South Africa is banned. So by putting out a message and a billboard that says, don't buy illicit cigarettes, the real message there is buy legal cigarettes, and that's illegal to do in the country. We have a law that says don't do that.
As the National Council Against Smoking, do you want tobacco and cigarettes to be banned completely?
No, we already have legislation that restricts where people can smoke. We have legislation that allows us to communicate the harm to the public, because there is absolutely no health benefit to the smoker, to anybody around the smoker. So secondhand smoke also causes cancer, heart disease, etc., low birth weight in babies. And we have something called third-hand smoke, which we've been getting more and more evidence on, which is, for example, if you were a smoker and you use that jacket that you are wearing today, the harmful toxins will remain in your jacket and can also contribute to ill health for you as well as people around you.
Savera, we need a lot more time to discuss this, but unfortunately we run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us here in
Thanks
studio.
A lot.
That was Savera Kaladin. She is with the National Council Against Smoking in our studios. Now, after 10 o'clock, we continue with this discussion, so you have to stay tuned. But right now, it's time to take a look at sports news and whether or not Bafana Bafana should still be Bafana Bafana, or should they grow up? Over to Eben and Kendall.
Yeah, obviously everyone's got a one-liner for the coach today. I tell you that the country is up in arms with Bafana. Once again, they've drawn a blank, as we call it now, Kendall, drawn another blank.
Yep, absolutely failed to deliver. This, once again, another picture, obviously not from last night, but I think it encapsulates everything about how a lot of football fans are feeling right now about this lackluster performance by Bafana over 2 legs.
We have to say the following, though, that Gary Rodriguez, the guy in picture, scored 2 absolutely fantastic goals. And sometimes you have to tip your hat to the opposition and say, man, look at this strike. This is just a pure strike, proper proper goal, and that free kick, the first one.
Yeah.
It would have been goals against anyone in the world.
Absolutely, but it's all about anticipation. It's all about placement and so on and so forth. We all know that, you know what, the opportunities that we had in front of goal, we didn't use them. Once again, literally the same script all over again. Different coach, but same script. It's fascinating how it is that Bafana always seem to get us into that same space. We're waiting and hoping that other teams don't get that result, don't get this result. A bigger problem is in play here, and I think a bigger solution needs to be put in place because we haven't got it right. The last time we qualified for a World Cup, even 2002.
I know, I was at that World Cup. I traveled with Bafana. It's one of the highlights of my life, actually, going to Korea and Japan for that World Cup. But, you know, since back then, the same conversation's been had that we're having today. And I'll tell you why. Because we still don't have junior leagues in our country. We made all this money during 2010 World Cup, and we were going to invest it in junior professional leagues I'm talking about, where young people throughout the country can go play for their local team and see a pathway in the game. The other thing that I'm really upset about is the fact that our top schools, they don't create a framework for football to be played.
No, they don't. 500 million rand that was left by FIFA as part of their World Cup 2010 legacy to SAFA, to South African football, and we're not seeing the effects of that 500 million rand. And by talking about effects, we're not seeing what's happening. We're losing every single time a national team goes to play in international competition. We either don't qualify or we lose in the first round.
Kendall Magamate spitting the pearls of wisdom this morning. Well, what do you say? What is next for Bafana? That's our question of the day. Send us a tweet. We'll put it up at the top of the hour. It'll be interesting to see what you guys are thinking. We're exasperated with Bafana, as you are. But we'll be back with you at the top of the hour at 10.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
The Law Society has slammed notices sent to 4 universities to jack up standards or risk losing their LLB courses. The Council on Higher Education issued a stern warning to the universities to conform within 6 months.
I think it will affect the university. I think outside the law faculty, there's a funding issue.
It's been 112 years since Enoch Sontonga died as a relatively unknown composer, choir master and teacher. But today his legacy lives on through his greatest composition, Nkosi Sikeleli Afrika.
For all your news updates, stay tuned to Your World from Monday to Sunday.
What guides us? Is it something you can see? Hear? Feel? Or touch? What leads us onto greater experiences? Is it the words of our sacred texts? The advice of our elders? Or is it the actions of our people? The strength of our beliefs? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
You'll be back at the top of the hour. It's 10 o'clock exactly. Very good morning to you, Central African Time. Hello, everybody. I'm with Kendall. Kendall, it's been a good first hour.
Very good first hour, touching on a topic that's close to my heart, cigarettes and smoking, something that I used to do, and I'm so happy that I have managed to actually kick that habit.
It's the worst drug. I kicked it as well. Yeah. I haven't smoked now in 6 months.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations.
So, the biggest achievement for me. But we're asking you on our poll, do you have a problem with illegal cigarettes? And I can tell you, every day I still think about smoking because this thing is such an addictive, it's the most addictive substance, I think, on the planet.
Incredibly insidious how it operates in our system. And we want to find out from you, do you have a problem with illicit, illegal cigarettes? 184 votes have come in, Eben, and 71% say yes. A little up on a little earlier, where 71% of our respondents say yes, they've got a problem with illegal cigarettes.
Yeah, interesting. We should have, because, you know, if we're going to make it available to the public, at least it should be safe, according to me. Lachasa says tobacco trade, let all those transporting and selling illegal cigarettes be arrested. That's the solution. Yep, that's the solution with all of our crime.
Gudani says they serve the same function as legal cigarettes. Only difference is that the method of entry into the country as well as the price.
Well, Gudani, 80% of it is now made in South Africa. That's a statistic that's just come out today. Is that 8 out of 10 cigarettes, that's the 15 million we smoke every day, is made here in South Africa now. But, of course, we've got a SADC problem that's developing in Lesotho. And we've sent a ministerial team to go and deal, but the assassination of senior Defence Force figures is a problem.
Absolutely, and we want to find out from you, want you to get involved with this particular conversation, and we'd like to find out from you, how do we deal with this crisis in Lesotho?
Don van der Voetsek tweets us, hey Don, we can't use that name, man. Newsroom, before we deal with the crisis in Lesotho, we must first deal with KZN's infamous political assassinations. Well, nearly 100 councillors or politicians have died in the last, that's since 2014. So he's got a point. We need to look at it.
We know that the president is busy with the Minister of Police.
The president is taking charge.
All of this. And
Freaky Flash, did we miss that? Put it back up.
Yeah, I've got some comments that we'd like to share with you. Freaky Flash had something to say.
Yes, there we go.
There is. Gudani says, look, we don't. It's their own problem to solve. You don't see them trying to get involved in our internal affairs.
Yeah, but it's a SADC problem now, and we, of course, are the leading light in the Southern African development community. So we have responsibilities there. Our sports question today, well, Bafana.
The sadness, the pain, the anguish, feeling it again. What's next for Bafana after losing 2-1 in Durban? The first did it in Praia last week. Do it again in Durban, 2-1 loss to Cape Verde.
Yeah, that's true. We were kind of blank in front of goal, to be honest. This one from Butibang Horse. He says to us, dissolve the SAFA board like the SABC. Ow, wena?
Lechasa says, remember what I said from Monday? Don't trust Bafana. They should join Trevor Noah. They're comedians.
Lechasa said on Monday that he wants a divorce from Bafana.
He did say that.
He's a regular contributor. Keep on tweeting us and keep on telling us what you think. This is the Newsroom Show. It's about you getting involved with us on the stories of any given day. Myself and Kendall are now going to give you the top stories at this very hour. President Jacob Zuma is to convene a high-level meeting with Police Minister Fikile Mbalula and other top police and intelligence officials to discuss the spate of political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment last night in a case brought by the EFF and other parties to have Parliament impeach the President. Regional body SADC is to send a ministerial team to Lesotho to get first-hand information on the apparent assassination of the army commander Juantle Motsomotso. Those are our top stories. Let's go over to Kendall for sport.
Ewan, thank you very much. Quite a lot to cover in this morning. In this hour, we'll also have Richard Glover, the CEO of Tennis South Africa, to have a little chat about some of what's been happening in the world of tennis. But I do get ahead of myself. Good morning to you. This is what else we've got for you in the sports today. After promising much, Stuart Baxter and his Chargers failed to deliver on their promise to bag 6 points from the World Cup qualifiers against Cape Verde, slumping to a 4-2 loss on aggregate.
We were chasing with a lot of attacking players on the field and not really a lot of organisation.
Kevin Anderson triumphs over big-hitting American Sam Querrey in 4 thrilling sets to become the first South African to make a Grand Slam semi-final since 2003.
That's it. Kevin Anderson is going to the US Open semi-finals.
6-7, 6-3, 7-6.
Getting through, it just feels, absolutely fantastic.
And Brazil's Olympic chief Carlos Nussmann gets arrested as Brazilian and French authorities uncover an international vote-buying scheme for the awarding of the 2016 Olympic host rights to Rio de Janeiro. All this and more I've got for you later on. Make sure you stick around for it. But for now, do stay with Eben as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Good morning. If you have just joined us, this is our top story right now. Now, President Jacob Zuma is to convene a high-level meeting with Police Minister Fikile Mbalula and other top police and intelligence officials to discuss the spate of political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. This after the death of former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Magaka earlier this week. He succumbed to wounds he sustained when he was shot in an ambush in July of this year.
Sindiso Magaka is now the 4th leader to have died in Mzimkhulu alone. After almost 2 months in hospital, he lost his fight. His family says they were hopeful as he was recovering well and have been left stunned by his sudden death.
Friday and Saturday, the situation just changed completely. He had a stomach ache, then after that, I think it was on Monday, when the doctor called us and told us that, okay, his heart has failed.
Neighbors and ANC members expressed deep shock. Scores gathered at his home to pay their respects. But outside, ANC members brandishing placards saying enough is enough, their anger directed at some leaders. The mood so tense that some party leaders were turned away. Party leaders say the situation in the province is now intolerable.
I can't lie, this situation is unbearable to the movement. It's totally unbearable.
President Jacob Zuma has sent condolences to the family.
We condemn this. Condemn it with all the contempt it deserves. There is absolutely no reason why there should be political killings. Particularly if you take the killings in KwaZulu-Natal, they are clear that they are political and that in fact the people who are doing it, they could even belong to the same organization. It's terrible.
Magaka was serving as a PR councillor in the Mzimkhulu municipality. He rose to prominence when he became ANC Youth League Secretary General. At the time, Julius Malema was the Youth League President. Magaka will be laid to rest next week. I am Mhlongo, SABC News, Mzimkhulu.
Now, the EFF leader, Julius Malema, has said that he will attend the funeral of the former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Magaka on the condition that a thorough security assessment is done beforehand. He says this must be done in order to ensure that his life is not taken by what he calls bloodthirsty murderers. The EFF leader wrote a lengthy letter explaining how the news of his friend's death left him broken and in tears. In the letter, Malema said he had to turn back from a meeting he was driving to when he received a phone call telling him of the devastating news. Malema said he wanted to attend the funeral to pay his respects and find peace after the trauma he had suffered following the news of Magaka's death. The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment on whether Parliament should institute impeachment proceedings against President Jacob Zuma. Chief Justice Mogoeng says the court needs clarity on why it should intervene in Parliament's apparent inability to hold the president to account. The DA, EFF, COPE and the UDM want the court to order the National Assembly Speaker Baleka Mbete to impeach Zuma after he lied to Parliament over the Nkandla upgrade saga.
This could be termed part 2 of the Nkandla Constitutional Court case. After the ruling in March, Parliament instituted an impeachment as per the DA's application, which failed. Now the opposition parties which participated in that debate say it was unlawful.
Any impeachment process that does not accord the president and the people the right to a hearing is unconstitutional.
The DA agrees and goes a step further, arguing the court should instruct Parliament to enact legislation that impeachment go through an inquiry first before being debated. The main applicant, the EFF, says that the inquiry should have powers to cross-examine witnesses.
Multi-party committee, a mandate is to determine whether the president is guilty of serious misconduct or serious violation, conducted in public, consider relevant documents, and meaningful questioning of witnesses. And it doesn't have to be cross-examination, but witnesses can be questioned. And the president must be allowed an opportunity to come.
The question then is, would an instruction from this court not violate the separation of powers doctrine?
I just have a discomfort. That's why I just want to make sure that I understand what you are saying and what the basis for that are.
Mogoeng also disputed assertion by the Speaker of Parliament's Council about what her limitations are.
It would be inconsistent with an office of an impartial speaker for her to initiate proceedings for the removal of a president under Section 89(1).
No. Why?
Sorry, to initiate it of her own accord.
Why?
Because a motion of no confidence is by its nature partisan.
Well, now an update on a story that's developing this morning as we speak. Yes, 16 people have been injured after scaffolding from a building collapse in Orange Grove, north of the city of Johannesburg. 2 people have been taken to hospital and others are being treated at the scene. It's understood the building on Louis Botha Avenue was undergoing a facelift. Scaffolding and part of the brick structure collapsed early this morning. It crashed onto 2 minibus taxis and a vehicle that was parked nearby. Most of the injured were occupants of the taxi.
Patients were treated for minor to moderate injuries, and then 14 of those 16 patients were transported to Busamet for further medical care, and then the other 2 were transported to Charlotte Maxeke for further medical care also. Yeah, of course, at this stage, the cause of the collapse, it's unknown. However, our relevant authorities from the city of Johannesburg will be investigating what might be the cause of that wall collapse.
Now, moving on to a case that's all in the news this morning. Yes, a case of attempted murder has been opened following a shooting incident in Johannesburg involving businessman Kenny Kunene. Kunene was traveling in the Norwood area in the city last night when the shooting incident allegedly occurred. It is reported that a car approached Kunene's BMW, blocking it before the occupant started shooting at him and another occupant. It's alleged the incident could have been a botched hijacking. Several bullets were allegedly fired at the car. No one was injured. This morning, Kunene confirmed the incident to us here at SABC News.
I was at the office in Sandton and busy there. Mr. Mutale joined me and another bishop. And then later on, a friend called. She wanted to see me, so I said she must come to the office. But then I had to go to the Houghton area, Norwood Houghton there. And when the lady came, I then said, "Mama, can you just use your car quickly?" Because when we got downstairs, I left my car keys in the office. So we drove to that side. I asked her that I drive because she will drive slow. so I'll be faster so that we can come back. And on our way back, we're on Scott Street to join Collet Drive. And as I'm approaching the turn-off into Collet Drive so I can join the highway back to Greyston, a car just overtook me, a white car, it's a Lexus SUV. It just overtook me. I thought at first these guys were drunk, but then I hit the brakes to give them way. Then they stopped in front of me and the doors opened. And the guy behind the passenger took out the gun, cocked the gun. The passenger in front also, as he was walking, I could see he was holding a gun. So I hit the brakes, put the car on reverse out of that instinct. And then as I was reversing, I hit the pavement with the back tire, then the front tire. That's when they got the opportunity. They stepped onto the pavement and they started shooting.
Regional body SADC is to send a ministerial team to Lesotho to get first-hand information on the apparent assassination of Army Commander Juantle Motsomotso, as well as the killing of 2 senior Army officers by Motsomotso's bodyguard. The shooting happened at an Army barracks yesterday. Last night, Lesotho's recently elected Prime Minister, Tom Thabane, assured Basotho, as well as neighboring countries, that he's still in charge. Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma has called for calm in the Mountain Kingdom.
Reports said the commander was injured, but unconfirmed reports say he too was killed. Both Hashatsi and Sichile were implicated in the killing of a former army commander, Maparankwe Mahau, in June 2015, but neither confirmed or denied their involvement.
For now, investigations are still going on, and the leadership of the Lesotho Defence Force will be able to brief us at a later stage as they are still pursuing those who might have been involved also in that conspiracy.
Zuma has called for calm in Lesotho as tensions mount in the Mountain Kingdom. The has commented on the current situation in Lesotho.
From the point of view, we thought that the Lesotho problem has ended. And this is what we were promised by the new Prime Minister, who said, now there's going to be peace in Lesotho.
Last, the Deputy Prime Minister fled the country and the former Defense Minister was arrested. He says upon his return from China, he will immediately meet Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa to update him on the latest developments, as he is the SADC pointsman in Lesotho. President Zuma says he is surprised that this is happening, as they were assured at the SADC meeting that all was normal.
Appeals to the leadership in Lesotho to take things easy, to solve their problems peacefully, without getting into a situation where we could have another kind of conflict in Lesotho. We are actually praying and hoping that they are going to contain themselves and deal with matters properly, as the lead
and unemployment.
People depend on them.
Has appointed a committee which will look at the implementation of the Pumapi Commission recommendations, chief amongst those the constitutional and security reforms. Sophie Mukwena, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now for an update, the latest coming out of the Mountain Kingdom, we are joined on the line by our correspondent there, Rapelang Khadebe. Very good morning to you, Rapelang. Just give us a quick update. What is the situation there right now?
Beautiful morning to you. It is a relatively calm morning today. Many of us have come to terms with what has happened, learning through in the media later in the evening, but it's business as usual today. We will be expecting the arrival of the SADC Oversight Committee anytime today. They will be having a briefing from President Jacob Zuma through Deputy President Ramaphosa to give him the latest updates on what has actually transpired. And the team and the delegation will start their work tomorrow. This is what will be happening for most of the day. Yesterday, there was a press briefing by the Prime Minister, and he was just confirming that things are normal. He has been briefed. He announced the names of all the deceased, and actually confirmed that the military command is in charge and has pledged allegiance to support his government. The deputy of the deceased, which is now Major Dineo Popa in the military rank, is taking the reins over. He later arrived in support to the Prime Minister to show that he is fully after the government and will be working tirelessly to get to the bottom of the entire saga.
Rapalang, just take us back to the shooting incident itself. We are led to believe that it's one of his own bodyguards that did the shooting and shot 2 others as well. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. It is actually, one would actually consider it almost an assassination, because the 2 characters are the ones who were mentioned in the former Judge Pumape report, being Bulane Sichili and Tifo Hashad. So there had been steps taken forward to try and book people who were involved in the criminal elements, brought to book. So we really wouldn't know whether this is one of the things that sparked the shooting, but they were in the office and the shooting happened inside the office. It is the time when they were supposed to be making reports, daily reports, as a usual routine. So there couldn't be any suspect for them not to go into the office, as they are relatively high-ranking in terms of the military ranking.
Rapalang, just in conclusion, we've seen a lot of instability in Lesotho in recent times. Why is the country battling so much to implement the agreements that are made at all these SADC meetings and interventions?
It is quite a complex matter. The truth is that political instability of Lesotho has been nothing but security-related issues. Now, when an agreement in 2015 was reached to go to elections, many showed the discontent as to elections will not definitely solve the problems. Again, when there was an impasse in the past 3 or 4 months, which led to the snap elections, it was opted to go to elections. And many were still saying going to elections might not be a solution. There has to be security reforms. Now, this government had pledged, as it came into power, that it intends to implement fully the SADC recommendations. But the problem is there's a lot of criminal elements that are involved. How do you draw the line to bring them to book? Some will resist, possibly, and how do you draw the balance in between?
Rapalang, I thank you for that update. That's our correspondent in Lesotho, Rapalang Khadebe, giving us an update on the escalating crisis there. At the moment, he reports it's calm in the Mountain Kingdom, of course, after the shooting there last week. We've been asking you the question of the day. How do we deal with this crisis in Lesotho? It seems to be a crisis without an ending. What are you guys telling us? How are you tweeting us? Many of you say, make Prince Buthelezi as an interim president, says Colin Mabuza. Oscarina tells us, invasion it must be. Jane Tooley tells us they must abolish the military in Lesotho. That's an interesting one. Demolish the military in Lesotho, yes. What are the threats to the country? Certainly not from South Africa, one would think. Interesting one. Anyhow, let's go back to our theme today. Our theme today, of course, we're dealing with the illicit trade in cigarettes, and we've been asking you on a poll to vote and tell us, what do you think about the issue? Do you have a problem with illegal cigarettes, for that matter? A lot of people do. This 191 votes in at the moment, and just over 70% of you are saying, yes, I have a problem with it. Some people say it's feeding illicit other crime. Others are saying, well, that there are those within the fraternity, that are feeding the trade themselves. 80% of illegal cigarettes are now made in South Africa. Gudani tells us they serve the same function as legal cigarettes. Only difference is the method of entry into the country and the price. Well, it's not the method of entry anymore. The vast majority are made in South Africa. Dechasa says the tobacco trade let all those transporting and selling illegal cigarettes be arrested. That's the solution, he says. Now, Professor Corne van Walbeek of the School of Economics at the University of Cape Town is running a research group with a focus on tobacco taxation and illicit trade. He's also a scientist with a strong focus on public health. Now, in the past, the group has produced substantial numbers of papers, including the economics of tobacco control in South Africa. Professor van Walbeek joins us from our Cape Town studios in Sea Point this morning. He's also been quite critical of the tobacco industry, especially on the growth of the illicit cigarette trade. A very good morning to you, Prof, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Evan.
Now, Prof, let's start at the beginning. You're running a research group at UCT focusing on tobacco taxation and the other important side issue, of course, illicit trade. Just give us a quick overview. What were some of your findings with regards to this?
Thank you very much. Yes, we run a research group. We're a group of scientists. We've got a strong public health focus. And basically what we are trying to understand is what is the impact of tobacco taxes, tobacco prices on consumption. And what we found is that since the early 1990s, there's been a significant decrease in the consumption of cigarettes. That decrease in consumption has more or less stabilized since about 2010. We do not find that there's a further decrease in consumption, but we still do find that there is a modest decrease in smoking prevalence. At the moment, we find that approximately 20% of people are still smoking. That was more than 33% 25 years ago. So there's been a very substantial decrease in the consumption of cigarettes, in smoking prevalence, but from a public health perspective, we see that that decrease has not continued since about 2010. In terms of illicit trade, we are fully persuaded that it is a problem in many parts of the countries. It is not a problem in all parts of the countries, but especially in the more deprived areas, we know that illicit trade is very substantial. Up to as much as 50% of some townships, cigarettes sold there are sold at well below prices that suggest that taxes have been paid. That is a problem. But at the same time, I think it's important to realize where this problem comes from. And it comes from essentially over a number of years. Since the early 1990s, the big tobacco companies, BAT specifically, ratcheting up the price of cigarettes well beyond what is accepted in terms of the increase in the excise tax. And what we find is that they have made it incredibly profitable for any alternative supplier, be they legal or illegal, to enter the market. So it's relatively cheap to produce cigarettes. The markups are incredibly high, and at the prices at which legal cigarettes are going, the popular brands, we tend to find that there is a very strong incentive for other operators, legal or illegal, to enter into that market. And many of them are, in fact, illegal.
Are they involved in the illegal trade, the tobacco industry in South Africa?
The tobacco industry consists effectively of two strands. There's the big international companies, British American Tobacco, Japan Tobacco International, Philip Morris, and so on, and they are covered by TISA, the Tobacco Institute of Southern Africa. Then there are also some of the smaller operators, and the smaller operators are not covered by TISA as the industry body, and they are often presented as being illegal. And it's not for me to say that they are illegal, that's a legal issue, but the suggestion is that a large number of them certainly have parts that are illicit. I cannot comment about British American Tobacco and the other large companies if they are involved in illicit trade, although there is much suggestion in other parts of the continent and in the other parts of the world that suggests that there has been a lot of illicit trading going on by these companies in the past.
I spoke to Francois van der Merwe a little bit earlier. You know him as the TISA chairperson. He tells me that it costs South Africa between 5 and 6 billion rand off the tax base every year, this illicit trade. Do you agree with that number, or are the numbers a little bit dodgy?
I would disagree with that number. If we look at the amount of money that the government intends to receive through tobacco taxation this year, it's in the order of 15 billion rand. That would thus be the legal market. If the illicit market is approximately 20% of the legal market, of the total market, that would suggest that that number is between 4 and 5 million rand. However, most of these illicit cigarettes are sold in areas where people are often economically deprived, where they are very price sensitive. So if it were to be that these cigarettes were to be sold at the full price, at 25 or 30 rand in these areas, we are likely to find that the number of cigarettes that are going to be sold like that would be substantially less. So yes, at a certain level, it might be a large number, probably in the order of 4 to 5 billion rand. However, if illicit trade were to be eradicated completely, which is something that one would hope is going to happen, one would find that a large number of people who are currently smoking illicit cigarettes are going to be finding themselves in a position where they would not be smoking anymore, or would be smoking much less, which means that the cost to the government in foregone income would be substantially less than what TISA is claiming it to be. I think 6 billion rand is a very substantial exaggeration of the true cost.
Prof, in conclusion, how do we come to terms with this? How do we deal effectively with this problem that we are facing?
Illicit cigarettes are not an issue of taxation. Illicit cigarettes is an issue of crime. And what we find with an issue of crime is that it needs to be treated as a crime and that it needs to be treated appropriately. The comment that was made by one of your viewers that we should track down the sellers and the transporters of illicit cigarettes, I would not agree with that. I would rather say we must track down the producers of the illicit cigarettes. If it is true that 80% of illicit cigarettes are manufactured in South Africa, what that then implies is these manufacturing plants are visible. They are identified. I'm sure that TISA will be able to identify them. And those places should be audited properly. They should be ensured that they pay the full taxes, because I think sometimes they pay part of the tax, but not necessarily all of the tax, and that they should be made fully compliant. And if they're not compliant, they should be shut down.
Professor, I thank you for joining us. Very interesting views and fantastic study that you've done on the issue. That's Professor Corne van Walbeek of the School of Economics at the University of Cape Town. Thanks for joining us today. Of course, yeah, we're dealing with illicit or illegal cigarettes. Did you know 16 Rand 30 out of every pack of cigarettes that you smoke is tax? On top of that, everything else, that is, well, the price that we would perceive to be normal. So if you're paying anything less than one would think under 25 Rand, that packet of cigarettes will have a lot to answer for. Anyhow, we're going to take a short commercial break. We'll come back and we'll talk more.
The Law Society has slammed notices sent to 4 universities to jack up standards or risk losing their LLB courses. The Council on Higher Education issued a stern warning to the universities to conform within 6 months.
I think it will affect the university. I think outside the law faculty, there's a funding issue.
It's been 112 years since Enoch Sontonga died as a relatively unknown composer, choir master and teacher. But today his legacy lives on through his greatest composition, Nkosi Sikeleli Afrika.
For all your news updates, stay tuned to Your World from Monday to Sunday.
What guides us? Is it something you can touch, hear, feel, or see? What leads us onto greater experiences? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? The advice of our elders? Or is it the actions of our people? The strength of our beliefs? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Welcome back. Good morning to you if you have just joined us here on the Newsroom show. Now, the percentage of black African professionals in Cape Town has increased by a mere 4% over the past 10 years. That's according to the Department of Labour. But these professionals are nowhere to be found, according to research conducted by Valerie Tapela, a coaching management alumnus at the University of Stellenbosch's Business School. The research findings echo similar research done in the field. Researcher from the Coaching Management alumnus at the University of Stellenbosch Business School, Valerie Tapela, joins us in our Sea Point studios to talk about this. Good morning to you, Valerie.
Good morning, Evan.
Certainly very concerning, the numbers that you've come up with. Just give us a quick idea. Where are the black professionals in Cape Town?
Well, I guess they're there, but in very, very little numbers. And it's been really, really hard for Cape-based organizations to increase their numbers in order to transform. And there are various reasons for that. One of them including that people talk a lot about Cape Town being cliquey, being un-African, unwelcoming, that they feel quite a bit of otherness when they're here.
Scarcity and slow growth, are those the only reasons? Is that as simple as that? Cape Town being cliquey and economic opportunities limited for blacks?
Well, I guess there is more. I mean, there's also the fact that there's the feeling that corporates haven't really transformed, haven't really taken into account, you know, the pressures that black professionals have. The salary gap as well in Cape Town is a little less than in Joburg, about 13%. So, you know, those are also some of the reasons. There's also less opportunities in Cape Town in terms of career-wise. So there's limited growth and limited things that people can do here.
Yeah, I'm a poster boy for that. I had to leave there to come to Joburg myself, so I get fully what you say. But another revelation in your research is that black African executives who migrate to big organizations with complex racial and cultural diversity, they often feel unwelcome and they don't stick around. Why is that?
One of the things that came out of the research is the kind of the transit nature of Cape Town. So people don't kind of commit to staying here forever. You know, quite a few executives are you know, going back and forth from here to Cape Town. So they're here during the week and they go back home. So there's some transit nature which occurs, which means people don't commit to the life here, the social environment. And by the way, that is a big influencer in terms of how people relate, even in a corporate environment. So the social environment, big repercussions in terms of whether people stay here or not.
What about women? Is it as tough for women in Cape Town?
Interestingly, in my study, I spoke to women only, and they found it really, really difficult. It was hard to find men, and when I did speak to them, you know, I guess, I don't know, but they just didn't have anything to say about it other than to say the salary gaps and just the difficulty of trying to break through, the fact that a lot of decisions get made in a rugby box in Newlands Stadium, and just from a culture point of view, rugby is not a big thing in black people's lives. So just feeling segregated and feeling some sort of, again, otherness and compromised because they're not part of the decision making.
Now, the city's demographics, how is that represented in what you've seen? Is it completely skewed? Still like the old work order, if one can call it that?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people say Cape Town is white, but when you look at statistics, that is not true. I think white people are about 13% of the population here. So I think it's more of a feeling. Cape Town feels white in the corporate space. It's still kind of segregated in terms of where people live. So you've got white people in the southern suburbs, Afrikaans people in the north, and black people along the end too. So it certainly feels white. And the other thing is that affordability in Cape Town is an issue. So where people live is really linked to what they can afford. And it is not in the kind of the southern suburbs, town area. So those are some of the things that people have to grapple with.
And you make some recommendations as to how the city can deal with these multiple challenges, as well as, of course, what black professionals can do. What are some of those recommendations you're putting forward, Valerie?
So some of the recommendations is, to acknowledge the black pressure that is there. So first of all is that people come here, they are recruited here, but there's this pressure. There's this pressure for them to perform. There's this pressure that they actually can't do it, that they're incompetent, which, as people reported, their white counterparts don't have to go through that thing. Not only from that, but black people themselves, around the room go, oh my God, please do not disappoint us. So there's pressure from all sorts of things. And if it can be, if people can be supported, if there's deliberate kind of helping people to adjust to all these concepts, then the city can make inroads. The other thing for the city to try and work out is, what is their legacy? What does the city want to leave in terms of transformation? So once that gets clear, then I guess what happens is, there's clear kind of pathways in terms of what people do. So those are kind of some of the things that came up. And for black professionals themselves, I think the main thing is that, just commit to Cape Town, come to Cape Town. We need to start changing the face of this city. And the question that they need to come up with is, why are they staying away? Why is there this transit nature to careers and all sorts of things that are related to Cape Town? And plan and ask for support. That's an important bit. And coaching has been...
Valerie, I'm going to have to cut you. Sorry, my dear. Thank you. Thanks for that. I'm going to have to come. We're going to have this conversation again, because I grew up in Stellenbosch, where you're studying, and it's even worse there. If you can admit to that, you can admit to that yourself. Valerie is a coaching management alumnus at the University of Stellenbosch's Business School, and she's done this fantastic study. Go and have a read up on it. It's very interesting. Thanks for that contribution, Valerie Tapela, live from our studios in Sea Point in Cape Town. And of course, she's talking as to why is it so difficult for a black professional like Kendall to get ahead in the mother city. We're happy here in Joburg, isn't it so, Kendall?
That's right. That's why I moved from Cape Town in the first place. Opportunities are very hard to get in Cape Town. In Joburg, it's been happening, and here I am. And you know what? Everybody's been lining up to give their opinion on what's going on with Bafana. First up, I'll bring you this report. It's a different one I'll be bringing you a little later. We start with how their chances of booking a spot to the 2018 FIFA World Cup to be hosted in Russia hangs in the balance. This comes after a 2-1 loss against Cape Verde at the Moses Mabhida Stadium. The loss does mean now that Bafana have collected 4 points out of 4 games, with 2 more still to be played.
out to get their 2018 FIFA World Cup qualifiers back on track, Bafana Bafana hosted Cape Verde on Tuesday evening in Durban. Favourites heading into this game despite losing the reverse fixture 2-1 on Friday, Bafana started positively. However, Cape Verde did enough to soak up the early pressure. The men in green and gold continue to pile more pressure on the away team, Bretli Khobla and Tukelo Ranti, combining well on the edge of the box, only for the latter to fire wide. Finding it hard to assert themselves early on in the contest, especially going forward, the Cape Verde resorted to set pieces and shooting from outside the box. 30 minutes into the contest, Bafana continued to boss proceedings, looking comfortable on the ball. However, they were undone by the lack of rhythm in the final third. Despite Bafana's lion's share of ball position and dominance, it was the visitors who broke the deadlock thanks to a wonder strike by Gary Rodriguez. As expected, Bafana started committing more numbers going forward in search of an equalizer. However, they left themselves vulnerable at the back and they were made to pay Rodriguez with his brace. The home side team managed to pull one back in the dying stages of the contest, courtesy of substitute Andy Lejali, after Cape Verde failed to clear their lines from a corner kick. However, it was a matter of too little too late, Cape Verde completing back-to-back 2-1 victories against Bafana. Joseph Mohali, SABC News.
Now, news from this morning is Kevin Anderson has become the first South African in 14 years to reach the semi-finals of a Grand Slam tennis tournament. 28th seeded Anderson upset American 17th seed Sam Querrey in 4 sets to advance to the last 4 of the US Open in New York. The last South African to get this far in a Grand Slam was Wayne Ferreira, who reached the Australian Open semi-finals in 2003.
Anderson started with a bang on the Arthur Ashe court. He took Querrey all the way to the tiebreak in the first set and bagged it after 45 minutes, courtesy of some brilliant returning on the big Querrey serve. Querrey returned the favour in the second set. Anderson squandered a set point and the American eventually clinched it in yet another tiebreak. Anderson managed a break of serve in the 6th game of the 3rd set and held on to take it 6-3.
That's the way to shut the gates.
But the 4th set was another nerve-wracking tiebreaker. Anderson needed 3.5 hours and 2 match points to wrap it up and finally secured his spot in the semi-finals of a Grand Slam event.
That's it. Kevin Anderson is going to the US Open semi-finals.
This is, this is incredible. At this stage and playing on one of the most famous courts in the world, in a night session and getting through, it just feels absolutely fantastic. And just wanted to thank everybody. I know it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you guys stuck out here, so really appreciate it. Thank you.
A big day for South African tennis and a big day for Kevin Anderson.
Anderson will face 12th seeded Spaniard Pablo Carreño Busta in the last 4.
Honestly, right now, I'm going to put that on hold a little bit. This is, very special for me. It's my first time ever being here, so I'll try and enjoy it a little bit. And then, of course, it's time to get ready. Pablo's a great player. I've played him, also played him during the summer. He's had an unbelievable year. It's going to be a tough battle, but I'm just so excited, to be competing in a semi-final at a Grand Slam.
Carreño Busta is expected to be a tough customer. The Spaniard hasn't yet dropped a set in this tournament. He raced past Argentina's Diego Schwartzman in straight sets. In the women's draw, 9th seeded American Venus Williams reached her 23rd Grand Slam semi-final. She beat 13th seeded Petra Kvitova of the Czech Republic in 3 sets. Williams will next face her compatriot Sloane Stephens. Stephens upset 16th seeded Latvian Anastasia Sevastova 6-3, 3-6, 7-6. She became the first unseeded American woman to reach the Final 4 in New York since Williams did so 20 years ago. Liesl Zankel, SABC News.
And of course, the big story for us here in South Africa is how early this morning Kevin Anderson, for the longest time South Africa's top men's singles player, took out Sam Querrey, a formidable power hitter, to advance to the US Open semi-finals. The first time a South African gets that far in a Grand Slam since 2003. A great story that we all hope will light the way for our Davis Cup team, which, will be playing in the Davis Cup Euro Africa Group Zone. Round 3 tie against Denmark. With us to chat about all of this exciting stuff is Richard Glover, the CEO for Tennis South Africa. Richard, thanks very much for coming through.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
How great is it that we're talking on a morning that Kevin Anderson does what he did this morning?
No, I mean, it's absolutely hugely significant for tennis in this country. I must say, when he hit the winning shot, or when Querrey hit the shot out for Anderson to win the game, my phone absolutely exploded with messages from people all over the world. So I think it shows just the significance of what this means for South African tennis. Massive.
Yeah, he's rolled back the years for South African tennis fans. It was a thrilling slugfest. I was trying to get ready for work. I stayed behind. I was actually 20, 30 minutes late because I couldn't peel myself away from the TV this morning.
Yeah, it was a very, very close match. I think it's probably a lot closer than maybe the scoreline suggests. A four-setter with 3 of those sets going to tie breaks. Yeah. I think Kevin obviously lost a heartbreaking 5-setter against Querrey at Wimbledon earlier this year. So he had something to prove, and he certainly did that today.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming Davis Cup tie against Denmark. It's very important in the scheme of things. We've been looking forward to getting to this point where we can actually play a promotion tie, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just for people who don't understand the Davis Cup structure, there's really 4 divisions to the Davis Cup. The World Group is like Division 1, and there's Division 2, Division 3, Division 4.
Just also a contextual, when you say World Group, you're talking about the teams that we see, the Englands, the Australias, is that
we're talking about the big teams, sort of the biggest nations in the world play in the World Group or Division 1. Right. And we're in what I'd call Division 3, and we're in a promotion tie to get promoted to Division 2. So we're going to Denmark we're going to Denmark this weekend to play next weekend. And look, it's going to be a very, very even tie and a very, very close tie, but the team are in good spirits. The preparations have been good, and we're cautiously optimistic that we can get promoted to the group below the World Group.
It would be really nice to have that star power that Kevin brings, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I mean, I think Kevin probably doesn't get the credit he deserves in South Africa because of the fact he doesn't play Davis Cup tennis. Yeah. But I have a slightly different perspective. I think it's probably more important to have a fit and firing Kevin Anderson doing well at Grand Slams in terms of the profile of tennis in this country, over and above him playing Davis Cup tennis. So it would be great to have him, and I think we're in discussions with him, and if we get promoted, I'm cautiously optimistic he could make himself available for Davis Cup next year. But look, he's doing fantastic things for South African tennis by doing so well at the US Open at the moment.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Take us through a little bit of that thinking when you say he might actually be doing better and more for South African tennis by doing well as an individual player in Grand Slams and so forth than focusing on the Davis Cup for now. Can you take us through that?
Sure. I mean, that's an excellent question. So I think if you look at South African sport, the headlines tend to get dominated by the big three, soccer, rugby, cricket. And Cinderella sports like tennis tend to only get noticed during the Grand Slams, during Wimbledon especially, but some of the 3 other Grand Slams. And so to have a South African doing really well at the Grand Slams, it just raises the profile. Because there's a lot of good things happening off the court in Tennis South Africa at the moment, but it always helps if there's success on the court, and that's what Kevin is really helping us do in terms of elevating the profile of the sport.
Okay, 2 last questions for you. One is, what kind of form are the players in? We know that Raven Klaasen didn't do so well in the US Open, didn't get into September, but what kind of form are all the players in for this tie?
Yeah, I mean, I've been speaking to our Davis Cup captain, Marcus Andriska, on a regular basis, and he feels the team are in a really good space. I think Lloyd Harris, who's our #1 singles player, has been doing really well in terms of that transition from futures to challengers, which are stepping stone tournaments, and he's starting to make an impact at challenger level. Nick Scholz is looking in good shape as well. Nick actually really won the last tie for us by coming back from 2-0 against Slovenia and winning in 5 sets, and that turned the tie completely. So the 2 singles boys are looking good, and then we've obviously got Raven and Ruan Rulofse in the doubles, and they're becoming a very formidable doubles unit. So look, it's going to be close. Denmark have left out their #1 player because he's not available, so that even levels the playing field really nicely. They've got home ground advantage, but we're playing a hard court indoor, which is good for us. So it's going to be really exciting and really close. I think it could come down to the last day of singles.
Now, we're definitely looking forward to that. Now, for those that don't know, we're just 3 weeks short of the day when last year, when you and Tennis South Africa chose to reveal you as the CEO to take Tennis South Africa into the future. What's been your biggest success in that time? And also in the same breath, what's been your biggest opportunity that you're still mining?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think if you probably look at the footage from 11 months ago, I probably look a lot younger. I think I've aged quite significantly in the last 11 months.
Looking great.
Thank you. But I think probably one of the biggest early successes, as I would call it, is the fact that we have managed to secure 5 new sponsors in 2017 alone. And sponsorship's important because it starts to generate money that we can invest in our different structures, in transformation and development, into club tennis, into junior tennis. And we're starting to do that. So that's something that I'm really excited about, that you're going to see some really good progress across a number of fronts from a Tennis South Africa perspective over the coming months. In terms of areas we're still looking at, well, it's a long road, and we have a few steps into a very, very long road. But one of the areas that we're really focusing on moving forward is in the transformation and development space. And as I said, some of the money that we've started to bring in from sponsors is going to be invested significantly in the transformation and development space. What we're doing is we're creating what we call development centres, which are Tennis South Africa funded centres and controlled centres. We're starting in 3 provinces. The first rollout will be in the Western Cape later this year. Then it'll be Gauteng, then it'll be Eastern Cape. And those are significant because they're looking at growing tennis not just from a grassroots perspective, but also from a talent ID perspective, identifying talented young black kids and fast-tracking them into a high-performance structure and really trying to give those kids a level playing field to become high-performance athletes.
Richard, thank you very much for coming through. Richard Glover, a man who talks from the hip and also walks the talk. Really appreciate your time and wishing you all the best with the rest of your journey as CEO of Tennis South Africa.
Thank you very much.
There you have it. We couldn't have scripted it better. Richard Glover coming to talk to us about the Davis Cup tie on the same day that Kevin Anderson rolls back the years as South African back into a Grand Slam semi-final. We'll be back shortly. Stay close.
I'm Alicia Jali, joining us live from our Johannesburg studios. A quick look now at your current news leaders. Parliament's Communications Committee has decided on 5 names to sit on the SABC's interim board. And the Constitutional Court has directed Social Development Minister Bathabile Dlamini and her department to account for their handling of the social grants contract.
And in tennis, Serena Williams has withdrawn from the BNP Paribas Open in Indian Wells and the Miami Open due to a left knee injury.
We're expecting it to move just in the towards the southern parts of the country, not so much coming towards southern Africa, not even touching the Mozambique channel. It's just going to move back towards the Indian Ocean.
Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Today on Rights and Recourse, we will unpack the new Promotional Court bill.
The idea of the bill is not to overregulate, to basically set the principles.
The most important aspect of this bill is that it understands that customary law, by its nature, is consensual. That I have a right to affiliate, I have a right, therefore, to opt in, and I have a right to opt out.
The opt-out provision is basically one that you've got to respect the court in the sense of, if you've been summoned, you've got to tell the clerk of the court at least that you're not willing to attend.
The challenge that I would like to throw to the Department of Justice, it has to come up with mechanisms of ensuring that people who exercise their right to opt out or to opt in are not in any way victimized.
Hashtag Rights with Dumila Matez on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
It's the final hour here on the Newsroom. It's 1100 hours Central Africa time. I'm Elvis Preslin.
And I'm Kendall Makamad.
Jumbo Africa. And a warm welcome. Now, we focus this morning on the 15 million illegal cigarettes, Kendall, that are being smoked in this country on a daily basis.
It's an incredibly crazy figure, but yes, 15 million illicit cigarettes. Never mind the legal ones. So we're asking you on today, do you have a problem with illegal cigarettes?
Well, 201 votes in, only 29% saying that they don't have a problem. 71% of people in South Africa, on the continent of Africa, suggesting that they do have a problem. But you're also tweeting us on the matter.
Francis Nicholson says the smuggling of cigarettes is directly attributable to overtaxing of the product.
Yes, we heard earlier on 16 Rand 40 is going to the government just for taxes on the cigarette pack. Onuke says, what is illegal cigarettes? Nothing like that. A cigarette is a cigarette. How to stop smoking should be the focus, not the source.
I really like the way Onikwa is taking this particular topic because I agree with you 100%, Mr. Christian.
All right, these are some of your comments. Please keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But also, a very disturbing issue currently happening in Lesotho. SADC is sending a ministerial team to Lesotho to get information on the apparent assassination of the army commander there, as well as two bodyguards, as well as two other personnel being shot dead in Lesotho, Kendall.
Yes, and we want to find out from you. To get involved in this discussion, tell us how you think we should be dealing with the crisis in Lesotho.
Nozi says, why should we focus on Lesotho when we have our own killing fields in KZN? We are no different from Lesotho. Fix South Africa first, says Onuke. Says Nozi, rather.
And Mutlu Johnson says, we heard last week that every country resolves its own internal affairs.
Well, those are your thoughts. You can keep them coming, but we're also focusing on a sports question today. Bafana, are they growing up or not, Kendall?
It seems like not. Stuck on a Bafana tag, losing 2-1 at home. They did it in Praia, 2-1, and then come back home to Durban, lose another 2-1. Wow, scuppers their World Cup hopes, it does.
You're being lashed on your own home ground. Your fans look like this picture here behind us. So, what do you say to us about that? Let's take a look.
What's next for Bafana?
Bekumusi says that Asafa need to rethink how they run our football. Results are not forthcoming. We can't do the same things expecting different results here.
That is the nub of the matter. It's been the same. Vilmi Nimtsweni says, just be patient. Qualifiers were really that. This year for all the big teams in Africa. There's no time for patience anymore. It's 2017. Last time we qualified was 2002.
Not a good enough excuse, I might add, but we've got work to do. Let's take a look at your news headlines. President Jacob Zuma is to convene a high-level meeting with the Police Minister Fikile Mbalula and top police and intelligence officials to discuss the spate of political killings in KZN. The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment last night in the case brought by the EFF and other opposition parties to have the President Jacob Zuma impeached. And that worrying story, regional body SADC is to send that ministerial team to Lesotho to get first-hand information on the apparent assassination of the army commander, Motwantle Motsomotso. So those are your headlines. But before we get there, let's find out from Kendall Makamata whether or not Stuart Baxter will take a back seat.
Oh, interesting question that. I'm sure we'll be getting lots and lots of answers to that over the course of the day. Good morning to you. This is what we're bringing to you in the sports today. After promising much to a backstand, his Chargers failed to deliver on their promise to bag 6 points from their qualifiers against Cape Verde, slumping to a 4-2 loss on aggregate.
We were chasing with a lot of attacking players on the field and not really a lot of organisation.
Kevin Anderson triumphs over big-hitting American Sam Querrey in 4 thrilling sets to become the first South African to make a Grand Slam semi-final since 2003.
That's it. Kevin Anderson is going to the US Open semi-finals.
6-7, 6-3, 7-6. Getting through, it just feels, absolutely fantastic.
Brazil's Olympic chief Carlos Nussmann gets arrested as Brazilian and French authorities uncover an international vote-buying scheme for the awarding of the 2016 Olympic hosting rights to Rio de Janeiro. All this in more detail we'll have for you. I'll also be chatting to a very interesting entrepreneur, somebody who's starting the One City Run and taking it to Durban for the fastest 10-kilometer ever. Make sure you stay close, around about 11:35. For now, do stay with Elvis as he's got the news.
Kendall Malkamate will be back a little bit later, so you have to stay tuned. Now, President Jacob Zuma is to convene a high-level meeting with Police Minister Fikile Mbalula and top police and intelligence officials to discuss the spate of political killings in KZN. Now this after the death of the former ANC Youth League Secretary General, Sindiso Magaqa, on Monday. Now, he succumbed to wounds that he sustained when he was shot in an ambush in July this year.
Sindiso Magaqa is now the 4th leader to have died in Mzimkhulu alone. After almost 2 months in hospital, he lost his fight. His family says they were hopeful as he was recovering well and have been left stunned by his sudden death.
Friday and Saturday, the situation just changed completely. He had a stomach ache, then after that, then I think it was on Monday, when the doctor called us and told us that, okay, his heart is failed.
Neighbors and ANC members expressed deep shock. Scores gathered at his home to pay their respects. But outside, ANC members brandishing placards saying enough is enough, their anger directed at some leaders. The mood so tense that some party leaders were turned away. Party leaders say the situation in the province is now intolerable.
I can't lie. This situation is unbearable to the movement. It's totally unbearable.
President Jacob Zuma has sent condolences to the family.
We condemn this. Condemn it with all the contempt it deserves. There is absolutely no reason why there should be political killings. Particularly if you take the killings in KwaZulu-Natal, they are clear that they are political and that, in fact, the people who are doing it, they could even belong to the same organization. It's terrible.
Magaqa was serving as a PR councillor in the Mzimkhulu municipality. He rose to prominence when he became ANC Youth League Secretary General. At the time, Julius Malema was the Youth League President. Magaqa will be laid to rest next week. I am Mhlongo, SABC News, Mzimkhulu.
The Hawks are probing allegations that the late former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Magaqa was poisoned. Hawk spokesperson Hangwani Malahutsi says they are awaiting the post-mortem results to determine the cause of death. Malahutsi says although there have been no arrest in Magaqa's shooting, they're hopeful of nabbing those responsible soon. The Hawk says that the death of Magaqa is a serious setback as he was one of the key witnesses in their investigation into political killings in KZN in KwaZulu-Natal. Magaqa and 2 other councillors were shot in July, not long after the murder of 3 others in the Mzimkhulu area. Meanwhile, the Economic Freedom Fighters leader, Commander-in-Chief Julius Malema, says that he will attend the funeral of the former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Magaqa on condition that a thorough security assessment is done beforehand. He says this must be done in order to ensure that his life is not taken by what he calls bloodthirsty murderers. The EFF leader wrote a lengthy letter explaining how the news of his friend left him broken and in tears. In that letter, Malema said he had to turn back from a meeting he was driving to when he received a phone call telling him of the devastating news. Malema said he wanted to attend the funeral to pay his respects and find peace after the trauma that he had suffered following the news of Magaka's death. The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment on whether Parliament should institute impeachment proceedings against the President Jacob Zuma. Chief Justice Mogoeng says that the court needs clarity on why it should intervene in Parliament's apparent inability to hold Zuma to account. The Democratic Alliance, Economic Freedom Fighters, COPE and the UDM want the court to order the National Assembly Speaker Baleka Mbete to impeach Zuma after he lied to Parliament over the Nkandla upgrading saga.
This could be termed part 2 of the Nkandla Constitutional Court case. After the ruling in March, Parliament instituted an impeachment as per the DA's application, which failed. Now the opposition parties which participated in that debate say it was unlawful.
Any impeachment process that does not accord the president and the people the right to a hearing is unconstitutional.
The DA agrees and goes a step further, arguing the court should instruct Parliament to enact legislation that impeachment go through an inquiry first before being debated. The main applicant, the EFF, says that the inquiry should have powers to cross-examine witnesses.
Multi-party committee, a mandate is to determine whether the president is guilty of serious misconduct or serious violation, conducted in public, consider relevant documents, and meaningful questioning of witnesses. And it doesn't have to be cross-examination, but witnesses can be questioned. And the president must be allowed an opportunity to come.
The question then is, would an instruction from this court not violate the separation of powers doctrine?
I just have a discomfort. That's why I just want to make sure that I understand what you are saying and what the basis for that are.
Mogoeng also disputed assertion by the Speaker of Parliament's Council about what her limitations are.
It would be inconsistent with an office of an impartial speaker for her to initiate proceedings for the removal of a president under Section 891.
No. Why?
Sorry, to initiate it of her own accord.
Why?
Because a motion of no confidence is by its nature partisan.
Of course, that's your news for now, and of course we continue, looking at the issues that surrounding that. Now, the SABC Retirement Fund were awarded 5 prestigious international awards this year. It remains one of the top-performing funds in the multi-billion-dollar South African industry, consistently yielding above-average member benefits and pensioner payments, which increase annually well in advance on excess of the inflation rate. It was awarded an International Business Award, the 2016 Silver Stevie Award winner in the category Communications and PR Campaign of the Year. And in addition, the pension fund also won another 2 IBA Stevie Awards in gold and silver in 2017, as well as 2 IABC Gold Quills, as well as the PR News Platinum Award. It's a number of awards, isn't it? This year, the SABC Pension Fund continues to support the best practices research as well as the awards process of the Institute of Retirement Fund Africa, or the RFA, in the interest of raising the bar for those in the industry and for the benefit of the members of the retirement funds and society at large. To tell us more, we are joined in studio. A very warm welcome to the Chief Executive Officer of the SABC Pension Fund, Anthony Williams. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning, Albert, and thank you so much.
Now, I've listed all the awards you've won. It sounds absolutely incredible. What are you doing right as the SABC Pension Fund to win all these awards?
Well, Albert, I must stress that we don't go out to win awards. You know, the board and the chairman of the board, their prime focus is to improve the well-being of our pensioners, and also to ensure that members' money is safe. And a natural outflow of that is to ensure that the governance is correct, that we have good investment practices and really good people on our investment team. And really, the awards were not something that we aimed for. They just happened to come by. But the prime focus is the members and the pensioners, and ensuring that we can give above-average pension increases, which we've given in the past 10 years, more than 10% per annum to our pensioners.
That's above average. And of course, if you're an SABC employee, you must be very happy that you're going on retirement today. But yes, what are you doing as the SABC Pension Fund? What are you doing differently from the other retirement funds that puts you above them?
You know, Aldous, I think all the retirement funds actually work very hard and try to achieve. I like to think that we listen to the needs of our members firstly. The board we've always tried to be known as the fund with a heart. And the board has a lot of empathy with their pensioners and with their members. They want the pensioners to really have a good life. They want members to know that their money is being looked after securely and being invested well. The things we do differently is we do a lot of research into the needs, and we listen to the results of that research. Communication-wise, once a year we travel the country. I travel the country with a team of people, and we treat all of our pensioners in each of the regions. There's 13. We treat them to a luncheon, as well as a show. And that's our way of communicating. I think almost every pensioner knows my face by now, and that's really the idea. You know, being a pension fund, we often have very boring news for pensioners, but we want them. We need to communicate to them. We need them to know that their money is safe. They're getting good pension increases. They need to know when there's a new trustee on board. They need assurance in these economic times. Pensioners lack assurance a lot of times. They need to be told their money is safe. And by doing these luncheons, we actually communicate directly with the pensioners. And I think that's what we do differently.
Yes, that's fantastic. Now, the Institute of Retirement Funds Africa, now they conducted the awards program for the last 29 years already. But it started off as a communication awards program, but it has now grown to a best practices awards, which also include that, and it competes really on an international scale. From your perspective as the SABC Pension Fund, why do you think that this needs to be supported in order to raise the bar in the industry?
Well, you know, Elvis, everyone needs a benchmark, and it's difficult. As pension funds and pension fund operatives, we work in silos. We need to know what our fellow colleagues are doing. The awards are a way of other funds displaying what they're doing differently, a way of us displaying what we are doing differently. It gives us motivation, it keeps us on our toes, and it helps us to try and just achieve a little bit better each year. So it plays a tremendous role in motivation.
Why do you believe, as the SABC Pension Fund, that you need to support something like the awards, the Best Practice Research Process, as well as the IFA Best Practice Awards in 2017, knowing that the SABC is currently looking for a guarantee from government to pay its debts?
Yes, I know it's a very sensitive issue, Elvis, and we have a lot of empathy with the employer. But you must remember that the pension fund is a separate legal entity. The monies in the pension fund belong to the members and the pensioners. They're not part of the SABC. The fund is very financially sound. We have 13 billion rand in reserves, and we earn very good returns each year. And the board took a decision to give something back to the IRFA, which has given so much to us over the years. And the amount we've sponsored isn't really a big amount. It's really half of my monthly salary, even less than that. And it really just goes towards the engraving on the trophies and the certificates. So it's not a big amount. And it's co-sponsored. We're the main sponsor, but there is a sub-sponsor, Lehigh Investments. So that, you know, the burden is borne by both of us.
And just finally, how does the SABC Pension Funds, your participation in the awards function, the Best Practice Award function, or awards rather, benefit the SABC members?
I think it gives them exposure. It gives them comfort that their pension fund is up there, it's being seen, and it's been trying to be involved in the industry. It shows them the interest of the board and the chairman in the pension fund industry itself.
I thank you so much, Mr. Williams, for joining us here in studio.
Thank you, Elvis.
That was the Chief Executive Officer of the SABC Pension Fund, Anthony Williams. But right now, the Arts and Culture Minister, Nathi Mthethwa, is launching the Heritage Month under the theme, The Year of OR Tambo, celebrating our liberation heritage. Let's go there live.
Who are both products and makers of history. And when they pass on, they leave a vision of a new and a better life and the tools with which to win and build it. These are people who have made it possible for us to be where we are today. We stand on their shoulders as they are the giants. Their actions, commands us to discharge our responsibilities with the utmost dedication, whatever the station of life we find ourselves. Must always remember that we are creating something that our people have never experienced before. Mistakes would be committed, but so our achievements are going to be committed. This month, this Heritage Month this year, is observed under the theme, the Year of Oliver Reginald Tambo, celebrating our liberation heritage. Our Heritage Month this year coincides with the birth of the African patriot who strode the globe like a true African colossus, Oliver Reginald Tambo, a man who was characterized by, amongst others, the following: an unwavering commitment to serve the people of our country, continent, and the world, with no expectation of any personal benefit. A sustained determination to conduct himself in a manner that communicates a message that never betray the cause of freedom, peace, and social progress. The formation of the liberation movements the world over had a common objective, which was to free the citizens from the colonial and intercolonial rule. South Africa's liberation and democracy is part of the internal victory against oppression. Key to this struggle, too, was the international solidarity. Therefore, it is important to put into context the resistance and liberation heritage route and international liberation heritage to be celebrated, which encompasses sites and persons both inside and outside the borders of South Africa. O.R. Tambo, South Africa's foremost diplomat, is memorialized both domestically and globally. It is important to emphasize the point of the resistance and liberation heritage route. This is an important part of the work of the leaders on the continent. As you would recall, that in 2011, UNESCO took a resolution to ask the countries of the continent, particularly those who come from the liberation struggle, to write their story, to tell the story. They term it Road to Independence. And Africa came together, countries of Africa came together and agreed that Tanzania should be the one who's leading these efforts of telling our story. In South Africa, we commenced with our national chapter of the resistance and liberation heritage route in 2015, where we have identified in each province at least 3 sites which form part of this liberation heritage route, and see how we connect with other countries. We have, for instance, something which connects us with Mozambique, as you would know, the Mbuzini Memorial Museum, the Matola one in Matola in Mozambique, which tells the story of a people of Southern Africa trotting a path to independence, to freedom, as it were. You will have with Zimbabwe, for instance, the Wankispolilo campaign and area, and many others. So it is an important task for us, because we think that if we are able to explain to the world about our road to independence through our own words, people will understand it the way we do. Also this year, we mark the 40th anniversary of the brutal murder of a combatant for freedom and social justice, Stephen Bantu Biko, a man who demonstrated in practical terms what it means to be a servant of the people. The program, therefore, and consistent with what I've outlined above, will embark on a number of initiatives. Remember that it's a month also where it coincides with the book week, which we've started already, and amongst them the programs would be, which we are encouraging people to take note and participate, those who could, on the book fair, the 8th of September. And on the 11th of September, as the ministry, we would be having a conversation with young people of our country who have gathered at the National Heritage monument in Gauteng, Groenkloof. And this is the place where we've started a process of having a South African national monument. If you go to any country, anywhere in the world, whether it's developed or developing nation, there is a place where you go to, which would be a sacred place for a people of that country. If you go to Senegal, in Dakar, for instance, you'll be confronted with a 10-meter statue of African Renaissance monument. Or you are in Algeria, in Algiers, you'll see this place where you go to and pay respect to the people of Algeria and so on. And in South Africa, we are doing the same because we believe that the tale of South Africa still needs to be told in its fullest. That is why we are acknowledging that our freedom was not exclusively because of South Africans. It was the world over, humanity across the globe contributed. We are engaging with the province continuously of Gauteng and Tshwane Municipality Metro to have this space where we will have the story, our story told. We started in the pre-colonial era. We have leaders. Wise people talk about Jan van Riebeeck in 1652. What they've not spoken about are the people Jan van Riebeeck met when he was here, are people who actually resisted Jan van Riebeeck. The Stearman brothers, for instance, just 2 months ago went back to Australia to repatriate one of the Stearman brothers' spirit back to South Africa, who was, taken to Australia, and where he was buried now has a railway line. So his spirit is back. You have people like Dorman, for instance, who fought fiercely against Jan van Riebeeck's people. If you go to the National Heritage Monument, which we launched in 2015 in Groenkloof, you'll see all these people, up to your warrior kings and chiefs of this continent, of this country particularly. Your Inzas, Kukuni, Makado, Dingan, Shaka, Tshwane, and many others, to those who fought against apartheid, be they coming from ANC, from Azapo, PAC, and so on. So you'll find all of them there in life-size statues telling our story, and all of them having a caption of who they are and what they did. So we'll be meeting with the young people there, interacting with them. And on the 18th of the month, we'll officially open the cultural village in Skagata, that is in KZN. On the 21st of September, we'll have a memorial lecture on Ger Sibande, the one who was dubbed the Lion of the East. His district in Mpumalanga is named after him. The district municipality there, he led the front on the potato boycott, for instance. We'll also take into account, and we're interacting with all the stakeholders, including the family, the fact that this is the 50th anniversary of the passing on of the Ken Temba. So it's a literary giant who wouldn't want to miss, because his footprints is everywhere in the literary space, especially within the journalistic fraternity. We should work double hard to make sure that these events all of them, which would be more of build-up programs for the actual day in Mpumalanga on the 24th, which is the Heritage Day. So we call upon our people in the country to honor the legacy of those who were before us, and also bearing in mind that Mpumalanga itself has produced a lot of giants, leaders in different social stations, be it in culture, in heritage, and so on. This is the province which produced our own Picasso, Gerald Sikoto. In fact, would be having the national event in Gerald Sikoto's own region, which is in Kangala region. It's a province of the greats. We've just laid to rest Ray Phiri, who no one doesn't know in South Africa, and his contribution in the arts, culture, and heritage landscape of this country. So we hope that they would be able to deal with the things which we're supposed to, as we started with the book week. We have outdated statistics, for instance, but they give a picture of more than 10 years ago that our nation is not a really reading nation. More than 10 years ago, I don't know whether there's any which has been done recently, which pointed that about 5% of South Africans read for leisure. Maybe it's a different story now. We have the social media, we have all others, and people said that South Africans don't buy books, but whenever you have book fair, people buy those books and so on. So we still have to do a lot in terms of research insofar as that is concerned, but we will, as the department, be worried on the culture of reading, and would want to do our best in contributing both from affirming indigenous languages and developing them. And it's the reason why, for instance, we thought it's important to focus on the indigenous language classic books. And that's why last year we highlighted that a classic book like Ityala la Mawele was turning 100 years since it was written. You would have Nkinselas and Kumundlove and many others around the country. And those classic books, one of the things they do, they make our youth to master their own mother tongues, their indigenous languages, which is important, even at this point. At this level, then I would want to thank you, DDG, and members of the media here with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister, for sharing with us the theme and also the program for the month.
Well, there you have it. That was the Art and Culture Minister, Nathi Mthethwa, who will today launch Heritage Month under the theme, The Year of OR Tambo, celebrating our liberation heritage.
Welcome back. Let's have a look now at our theme for today. More than 15 million illegal cigarettes are smoked every single day in South Africa. Now, in the process, the country has, well, he's listed amongst the top 5 illicit markets across the world. Last month, British American Tobacco South Africa launched an awareness campaign around the illicit trade of tobacco and cigarettes in this country. It's estimated that illegal tobacco products today account for approximately 24% of the South African market, with an estimated 5.5 billion illicit cigarettes sold in South Africa last year alone. It's also estimated that 80% of the total domestic trade in illicit tobacco is manufactured here in South Africa. Illicit trade networks in this country are said to be well established and linked to crime syndicates that are also involved in a host of other illegal activities such as hijacking and people smuggling. Now, the illicit cigarette trade also defrauds the South African government of much needed tax revenue, with an estimated of 5 billion rand in unpaid taxes on these illegal cigarettes recorded last year. Over the past years, 5 years that is, conservative estimates suggest that the fiscus lost more than 25, closer to 30 billion rand. Now, to talk about the illicit cigarette trade, we are joined from Cape Town by the chairman of the Tobacco Institute of Southern Africa, Francois van der Merwe. Very good morning to you, Francois. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Evan. Thank you for having me on your show.
Francois, I've spoken to people on social media, and the first question people want me to ask you is, what is an illegal cigarette? What is the illicit cigarette trade? And what form does it take in South Africa?
Evan, thank you. Very important matter, very important question. I'll also like to tell you where the illicit cigarettes do not come from, but to go directly to your question, there's a couple of things that makes a cigarette illegal. Firstly, if it does not comply with government packaging regulations. So on a pack, there needs to be various things. There needs to be health warnings, which is prescribed by government. There needs to be a tar nicotine, which is 12 milligram, 1.2. If it's beyond that, it's illegal. There needs to be a reduced ignition propensity marking on, which depicts a certain paper that needs to be used. There needs to be a quit smoking line telephone number on it. And there also needs to be a diamond stamp on it, which is a customs and excise legislative requirement. So any one or more of those that do not appear on the packs immediately makes it illegal. But in South Africa, we find that most even illegal products do comply with the packaging regulations. The biggest problem we have in South Africa is the fact that duties are evaded. Now, you might find it interesting that 16 Rand 30 on a packet of 20 is the minimum collectible tax that needs to go to government. That's 14 Rand 30 excise and 2 Rand VAT just on the excise. That's 16 Rand 30. So anything that sells below 16 Rand 30 must be deemed probably illegal.
Yeah, completely illegal. We see a lot of those cheap cigarettes doing the rounds now, but I saw something that you appeared before Parliament. Can you hear me?
Yes, Evan.
Okay, you admitted before Parliament's Trade and Industry Portfolio Committee that members of the tobacco industry are also guilty or involved of fueling illicit cigarette trade. Can you expand on that for us a little bit?
Yes, Evan, certainly. It's important to note where illicit cigarettes do not come from. And that is the legal industry that I represent. Members of the Institute comprises the whole value chain, farmers, processors, merchants, manufacturers, importers and exporters of cigarettes and other tobacco products. This is the industry that is under threat because of illegal industry, and this is the industry that does not contribute to illegal cigarettes. In fact, this is the industry that the government needs to protect so that this industry can grow, because this industry that I represent adds 23 billion to the GDP, pays 22 billion in taxes, of which more than 17 billion is excise and VAT, employs 8,000 to 10,000 workers on farms, with 35,000 to 40,000 dependents in rural areas, 600 million rand paid to farmers in rural areas where other jobs are hard to find, and with its multiplier effects, sustains an annual production of 54 billion. To this country. And this is what is under threat, even due to the illicit cigarettes. There is no contribution to illicit from this industry that I represent. But as you rightly say, there's a parallel industry which we call the illegal industry. And there needs to be a clear distinction between the industry that I represent, the full value chain that needs to be protected, and the other parallel industry which needs to be eradicated if we want to save this country. Because as you said, the statistics is shocking. Between 2010 and 2016, only 27 billion lost only to government. around 5 to 6 billion smoked a year illegal cigarettes at 750 to 800,000 packs of 20 per day. It defrauds the government of 4 billion rand average annually, now probably 5 to 6 billion rand. And this money goes into criminal syndicates. It has been proven that it funds other criminal activities as well, like human trafficking, weapon smuggling. It's been regarded and mentioned by Interpol as one of the top priorities in the world as far as criminal activities are concerned.
Francois, how did we become one of the top 5 illicit markets in the world for illegal cigarettes?
Yeah, but I lost you there, but I think, yes, certainly at one stage we were at top 5, but most definitely top 10. And previously our biggest problem was smuggling from Zimbabwe, where the products were manufactured there and smuggled into South Africa through various countries and our neighboring countries and so on. But SARS did a good job in clamping down with a border modernization program, but the problem has just shifted domestically. So 80% of all illicit products today are manufactured locally. And we believe it is not difficult to resolve this. It is not difficult, and the mandate lies with an integrated approach by government, all law enforcement agencies, but the sole and the primary mandate lies with the South African Revenue Service. And there's low-hanging fruit to be picked here, 4, 5, 6 billion rand a year that can be collected fairly easily by just doing certain things from the Revenue Service perspective.
Francois, in conclusion, I'm more worried about the public and the health and safety of the public. Quickly tell me, how do people differentiate between illegal and legal, and what are the safety hazards?
Well, Eben, most definitely, it's not only fiscal losses to the government and to the legal industry, but there's social impacts. And the biggest social impact is the government's health agenda that's been compromised. The government has an agenda which we support for people to reduce the consumption of tobacco products. But illegal products, minimum collectible tax of 1630, is sold and available. You walk down any street into any shop, you can buy cigarettes for 10 rand and below, 8 rand, 6 rand, 7 rand a pack. That certainly social impacts because it stimulates consumption, kids can buy it, poor people can buy it, and if people can defraud the government on taxes, the quality and compliance standard within those products are also questionable. So for consumers, it's not about buying a bargain. If you buy a packet of cigarettes for 7 rand, you must question the quality of that and the impact that that could have on your health. Tobacco is harmful already, but illegal products could be even more harmful because we've heard horror stories of what goes into those products. So the biggest indicator in South Africa is pricing. If you pay less than 16 rand 30, the red flags must go up and you must question the validity and the legality of that product and also think about the worst impact on your health. So integrated approach, legal industry, government, consumers, everybody working together for the better of this country, the health agenda, and also the social impacts that it has.
Francois, I thank you for joining us. We've run out of time. Interesting the information being shared with us with regards to illegal cigarettes and legal cigarettes. 16 rand 30. That's the number. Think about it. That was Chairman of the Tobacco Institute of Southern Africa, Francois van der Merwe, coming to you live from Cape Town.
Tell you what an interesting conversation that was. I quit smoking a long time ago, so it doesn't matter to me. Legal or illegal cigarettes are no good for you. They will end up killing you. You know what else is killing you and me is the manner and the pace at which things are going. South Africa's name will not be in the draw for the 2018 FIFA World Cup. Come the 1st of December. They lost 2-1 to Cape Verde in Durban last night, a repeat of last Friday's result in Praia. Bafana last qualified for a FIFA World Cup an entire 15 years ago.
Cape Verde has a population of more than 500,000 compared to South Africa's 55 million. Before taking on the Blue Sharks in Praia on Friday, Bafana were second behind Burkina Faso on goal difference in Group D. Cape Verde were the underdogs since they were at the bottom of the log without a point but with nothing to lose. Bafana's qualifying campaign was dealt a blow as they suffered a 2-1 loss in Praia. Last night in Durban, Dutch-born Gary Mendes Rodriguez, who plays for Galatasaray in Turkey, was the destroyer-in-chief.
No,
nayo leyo mpahla nangu-Gary akasibona ke Gary Rodriguez Kalagaja.
He emulated Nuno Rocha's first leg fit by grabbing a brace.
Feeling great, 6 points in 2 games. We worked hard and we deserve it. We were better and 6 points. This is our dream to go into the World Cup, and if we work like this, I believe that we will go.
The road to Russia 2018 is so bumpy for Bafana Bafana now, and it might even have to come to a dead end. Bafana are left with a home game against Burkina Faso and a mammoth task away against Senegal. And they are now at the bottom in Group D.
What went wrong?
Well, I think I'm far too disappointed at the moment to start making a total analysis, but I thought we played quite well the first half. I thought we created a few chances, we didn't take them. I have to look at that again with the free kicks. I think it's a very soft free kick. So we're making more and more attacking substitutions. And so the finish, we were chasing with a lot of attacking players on the field and not really a lot of organisation.
What has been happening in the Bafana Bafana camp since the 2002 Korea-Japan World Cup leaves a lot to be desired. Mtutuzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
Right now, Durban will host the inaugural FNB Durban 10-kilometer city surf run in October. As you all know this, we brought this to you yesterday right here on SABC. Headlining World Championship 10,000-meter silver medalist Joshua Cheptegei of Uganda and South African 10-kilometer record holder Stephen Mukoka. I would not be surprised if they actually met their target of making this the fastest 10-kilometer road race in the world for 2017. With me to chat more about it, Manfred Sadler, a man who requires no introduction to you because you've known him from years gone by when we've chatted about all sorts of things. Good morning to you.
Morning, Kendall. Thanks for having us.
Yes, sir. You've also brought with you Michael Stillwater, the founder, Michael Mayer of Stillwater Sports, I beg your pardon, the founder of One City Surf Run. Good morning to you.
Yeah, great to be here, Kendall.
How did you come about with this great idea? I'll start with you, Michael.
Well, all around the world, the big running events are not actually the city marathons that we see on TV, the Boston Marathons and the London Marathon, but actually the shorter distance running events like the Bay to Breakers event in San Francisco with 120,000 people. Yeah. And we really, with the love that South Africans have for running, we really want to create a platform of events in South Africa that allows for mass participation, but at the same time combines it with the inspiration and the excitement of world-class performances. And so we've got the Cape Town event, which saw a world record in the 12-kilometer earlier this year. In 2 weeks' time, we've got the Johannesburg event, the FNB Joburg 10K, and then we go to Durban. And the Durban event is the one where we bring in the world-class athletes, and we're going to try and run the fastest 10K in the world.
Okay, let's try and get this into context. What kind of times are we talking about here?
Well, it's fast times. The world record just under, Manfred's the expert, but the world record just under 27 minutes. The South African record is just in the region of 27:30 for men. And so we're looking at fast times in the sense of the world class times are much faster than the South African times. And so we're really bringing the international athletes to inspire our local athletes to run faster than they've ever run before, and maybe break the South African record.
Manfred, let me ask you this right now, specifically around the times and what's being tried right now. Durban specifically, why Durban? And why not, for example, somewhere like Cape Town? You've done Cape Town so many times, but why Durban? Do you think this is going to work?
Absolutely. Durban in October, perfect weather conditions. Durban is as flat as a pancake. You couldn't ask for a better route. It really is. It's as flat as this tabletop. And if the weather conditions are perfect, and you got guys like Joshua Cheptegei, you got Stephen Mukoka in there, a couple of other names we'll be announcing in the next few weeks and so on. My mouth is watering. I simply cannot wait for this because Cheptegei is viewers might remember he finished 30th at the World Cross Country Championships. He was leading up until the final 500 meters, and he hit the wall. Yeah. A few months later, he goes and finishes just behind Mo Farah in the 10,000 meters. And this is still a youngster. He's only 21. He's got such an amazing pedigree and so much potential going forward. And he said he wants to break the world 15-kilometer record in Nijmegen in November. This is going to be the perfect setup for him. So yeah, expect fast times. Mukoka has gone on record as saying he wants his own SA record, 27:38. And he's also saying, you know, conditions are good, pacemakers are good, we'll do it.
All right, now let's see what it is that people can expect when they get there. Because we've got Stephen Mokoka that we've spoken about. We've got Cheptegei. People who would not necessarily know his name, but they see he's running. They will say, yes, we saw that guy at the IWF World Champs. He finished just behind Mo Farah, who's as well known as one of the greatest, if not currently the greatest to have run the middle distances. What else can they expect in terms of entries? I mean, do we have a groundswell of entries from South Africans as well as people from the rest of the world?
Well, across the series, across the 3 events, we'll have over 40,000 runners running across the 3 events. So this is the first year of Durban. We expect around 8,000 runners. In Cape Town and Johannesburg, 15,000 runners. So it's a big event for Durban. I think there's a lot of entertainment, there's a lot of fun things happening, but there's a lot of support from sponsors also for the event. So I think it's going to be an overall experience. It's going to be fantastic to run along the route and see all the sights in Durban. But of course, that excitement that these athletes inject into the event is going to be amazing. And I just want to say one other thing. I think that Africa is the home of all the great runners. And if they don't live here now, they come from Africa.
Yes.
So we really very focused on creating a running event of excellence on African soil. And we believe that the 10 kilometer, which is accessible to most people, is the ideal distance to do it. And we look forward to a massively exciting day in Durban on the 8th of October.
Let me ask you this. I'm sure it's going to be very exciting. Were you a runner yourself at any time? You look like you could have been.
Yeah, no, I was a runner. I still run a bit more on the trails these days, but 5-10 kilometer was my distance back in the day.
Oh, so you know a good runner when you see one, besides what? So this man here, would you put him up for the challenge?
Put Michael up for the challenge.
No, I'm talking about, I'm asking Michael, would you put Manfred up for that challenge to put him in that space?
Michael is fitter than I am right now. He's creamy.
Yeah, no, he does trails. I mean, you need to be extremely fit to do trails. I tried to walk a trail. It was incredibly difficult.
But you also stopped smoking, so this is the perfect venue and event for you to come. So here's the challenge. See you in Durban.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that.
We've tried to get the athletics journalists to run, but we actually prefer that they cover the event.
They keep them alive.
And we'll make sure that they're entertained. But you know, it's going to be such an amazing event to watch that I think Manfred won't want to run. He'd want to.
I want to see this.
One of the things that I really loved about the work that you have been doing, Michael, is being shown right now to some of our viewers on this back wall here. The drama in this sequence as it comes to the end. That's the kind of drama we're expecting to be getting there, isn't it? Because we're looking at creating a new world's best time for 2017.
Well, what you're watching right now is the finish of the inaugural FNB Cape Town 12-1 run. They missed the world's best by 1 second. And then, of course, this year, Maurice Gachaga went and broke the world's best. So he's the world's fastest over 12 kilometers in the world. Last year in the FNB Cape Town 12, Stephen Mokoka won it. He also just missed out on a world's best, ahead of Daniel Salel, who was second in that race and second again in 2016. So always fast times.
Fantastic. I want to thank you so much for coming through, Manfred. Michael, may I thank you. Stillwater Sports, great stuff. I hope it goes well out in Durban.
Thanks very much, Kendall.
He's got Dennis